Good evening, members and members of the public. Welcome to this evening Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Apologies for absence. Councillor Coke.
Councillor Dan MacDonald, and I'm substituting for him.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Councillor Williams, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry. Councillor Campbell. Thank you. Councillor Hackwell.
Councillor Joy will be attending, but he might be late.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones is here.
Welcome, Councillor Jones. Record of the meeting. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 26th of October as correct?
Yep. Great.
Urgent matters. I have no urgent matters. That takes us to agenda item 4, disclosable pecuniary interest or any significant interest in whipping. Are there any declarations of DPR or other interests or any declarations of whipping? Okay, that takes us to the first item, I would say, agenda item 5, Universal Credit and Welfare Reforms Annual Progress Report. I asked Gemma Gilly, Head of Benefits and Financial Welfare, to introduce the report. Gemma.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to provide the committee with an update on the rollout of Universal Credit and Welfare Reform. As you may be aware, Universal Credit was rolled out as a full service in Medway in May 2018. It replaced 6 legacy benefits, including housing benefit, which meant changes to the way in which we administered it as a council. For various reasons, the migration of legacy benefit claims onto UC by the DWP has not been as quick as initially thought. Consequently, we will continue to have claims migrating onto Universal Credit up until 2028, where at that point we will be left to administer claims for pensioners, specified accommodation and temporary accommodation provided by the council as we do currently. We operate a caseload of just over 8,000 claims. I anticipate that by 2028 we'll have an ongoing caseload of approximately 5,000 claims. The report details the welfare reforms and actions taken by the council, including the effect on the HRA. The DWP were due to be present to answer questions in respect of Universal Credit, however, they are now unable to be here. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have in respect of the report. Any questions for the DWP that I am unable to clarify will be responded to in writing after consultation with the DWP. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Any member? Councillor Galvin.
Well, somebody better start, so I will. I think this is a very interesting, very good paper. We hear, and quite rightfully, that a lot of people in Medway are struggling, and that's quite understandable with the huge pressures of inflation that we've had over the last year or two. But it's good to see that the council's playing its full role in helping those people. And some of the sums that have been distributed are quite large. Just in a comment on paragraph 9.2, we talk about the free school meals support and then the other grant that's been distributed. And then it says that there's the costs associated with 139,000. I worked that out as a cost as a percentage as 8.1. I don't know. Is it? That sounds a bit high to me. I do would understand that distributing lots of small amounts is probably far more expensive, because it would cost probably just as much to distribute £200 as it would cost to distribute £2,000 with the costs involved. But I know that some charities and organisations have got their overhead costs to well in low single figures. So do we think 8.1 as the cost is a good or bad thing? Have we benchmarked that against other things? And just one final comment, Chair. We talk about section 11.3, where it talks about the good work that was done by the CAB, and it's a shame that Dan McDonald can't be with us this evening, because I happen to know that Dan and the CAB, both during the pandemic and afterwards, did a huge amount of work, and I think that needs to be highlighted, because they beavered away and took a lot of the strain of distributing grants from the council, and did and I know, and probably Dan will cringe at me saying this, but certainly Alan Jarrett, the previous leader of the council, was fulsome in his praise of Dan's work on that. So, and praise doesn't come lightly from Councillor Jarrett, as I well know. So I think that I'd like to put that on record that both the CAB and Dan did a brilliant job during that period. And I think that hard work must be acknowledged. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. Katie, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to answer the first question. So the reasonable administration costs as a proportion of the totality of the grant, which is some 4.5 million, is considerably less than 0.5%. So I think that's entirely reasonable, and it's completely within the bounds of the scheme. So it's against the 4.5 million. I take your point in that paragraph. It looks like it's as a proportion of just the amount that was issued through that free school meals element, but it's not. It's as a proportion of the whole 4.5 million grant.
Oh, that's good. So, yeah, but you're right. The way that paragraph reads is not so good. Perhaps we need to alter where it's written. No, that sort of percentage is absolutely brilliant. Well done to the team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. Thank you, Katie, for the clarification. Councillor Lowiller-Printer.
Pardon. There's a couple of areas I wanted to ask about. The first one was at 4.4, you're talking about a transition to universal credit and how there's transitional protection for those who might be slightly paid less as a result of switching over. How long does that go on for? And also, yeah, how long are you paying that for, or do they? Or will the recipient just keep that for however long they would have got it had it been prior to universal credit? You said the administration is streamlined more now, you're under universal credit. So does that mean it's a smaller team looking after it than you were looking after all those other 6 benefit claims? And then regarding the CAB, as Councillor Golding said, they have provided and still provide an excellent service, especially for debt advice to the clients, basically the residents of the community we live in. How do you, it says in the report that you're not expecting to grow the team so you could absorb that work into the team you already have. So do you have the skills to do that in the team? Do you have to, incur training? Do you have to grow it? And if you have that now, why did you have to outsource it in the first place? Because I'd like to know that the residents of Medway will still receive the same service that they're getting at the moment. So face-to-face, which I question because Gunwharf is not open, the hours that they're open and the quick delivery of responses to help, because with debt recovery, a quick turnaround is really important. Otherwise, they might miss the opportunity to actually consolidate all the debt or whatever the service they're getting. So it's just a bit of reassurance that you'll be able to deliver the same thing people are getting now without shortchanging them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Gemma, would you like to respond?
Yes, no problem. So initially, I'll take the transition question first. So it's only for us, we are only administering the housing benefit part still. So all of the rest of universal credit is being done by the DWP. So that is all done centrally. We do have a smaller team now. We've had sort of naturally the team has got smaller within my team because we don't need quite as many people. to administer housing benefit. That being said, we do still have significant vacancies within the team, so we are sort of working through that. In terms of the CAB, we are currently working on the plan to go forward. We are currently out to advert for 3 officers, so a senior officer and 2 financial welfare officers. We also will be having a debt advice officer, so a properly qualified debt officer within the council that will allow the council to provide regulated debt advice. In the meantime, we are strategically partnered with the Money and Pension Service, who we have, so they're providing 2 services to us. One, they're training all Medway Council staff who have money conversations to become money guiders. So we're having that standard across the council where everyone is giving the same level of advice. And then secondly, we are also part of the Money Advisor Network, which again is through the Money and Pension Service. It's something that is totally free to the council, but enables any council member of staff to be able to refer instantly to a debt advisor where the customer's with them. So if one of our officers are sitting with a customer, they can literally do the referral with the customer's permission, get a phone call straight back, or they can set it up to time for later. So we have plans in place to be able to. But obviously, you know, like you've said, we can't completely replicate what the CAB do, and you know, no one wants to. What we're trying to do is make it a Medway Council service. In terms of my service, it only came to pass in January through a cabinet paper. So that created a welfare and benefits and financial welfare service. So really we've only been establishing this service in Medway Council since sort of January into this year essentially. So prior to that, that's why that lot was commissioned out, and it was commissioned out through adult social care. It wasn't a business support function. It was an adult social care function, which has now been in-housed.
Thank you, Chairman. Would you like to come back?
Yeah, it's just to say, so you're taking on 4 new staff?
Yeah.
4 new staff. Are you providing like the 12-hour face-to-face? Is your end goal to have the face-to-face access that people can walk in off the street and see somebody for 12 hours a day?
Yes, so we're planning to go to libraries, hubs. We're going to have surgeries, but we're planning to, offer the service in many ways, and we're currently working on the hubs project to ensure that the welfare team is embedded within all of those hubs.
So they'll be able to access it at sort of 7:30 at night, things like that, because at the moment, if you contact the council, there isn't someone always available at those times for help.
Yeah, I mean, the council isn't open necessarily at 7:30 at night, but digitally they would be able to. So we're currently working with the digital team to be able to have a new online portal which will have a lot more information, ways to come into the council, ways to refer into my service.
So what's your provision for those who are not digitally enabled?
Again,
so the elderly who might want to just walk into the high street and speak to somebody?
Yeah, it will be going out into hubs and libraries and things, so the service will be there when the hubs and libraries are open.
And when will that be ready? Because it sounds like from this, it says January the 1st, that will be all ready for January the 1st.
As far as much as possible, yes. I mean, it's still going to be built upon. You know, we're not going to be a complete service on the 1st of January. We will be and when I say not complete service, I mean my whole service. We will still continue to improve as we're going through and as we're learning.
I can see what you're saying, and I really appreciate that you do have to have some sort of transition. But what I'm worried about is residents not having anywhere because you're not ready. You're not ready with the straight switch over that we have. So if I wanted to go down to Citizens Advice and get some debt advice for tomorrow, I could do that. Whereas it doesn't sound like you're going to be ready in January.
People can have debt advice today from Medway Council. We can refer to maps now. So that is all in place. So the debt advice, the money guiders, that's all in place and has been in place for about a year now. So
how do they access it?
Thank you, Councillor Prenter. Councillor Prenter, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Hugwell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Gemma. Thorough as normal. Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions. You mentioned that we've got a a pressure of an extra £1 million for the council tax reduction scheme this year, and it will probably continue into next year to add to the pressure that we've already got. Can you give me your thoughts on whether that's because of the change we made to the council tax reduction scheme last year, or is it just to the nature of the cost of living crisis that we're going through, etc.? So I'd just like your thoughts on the reasons why that increase has been, and whether it is due to the change we made to the scheme. I'd just like to know, in 7.2 you mention around the cases that are still outstanding for the applications, and there was 181 at the end of September. We're 2 months on. How many of those 181 have been dealt with 2 months later? I'd like to echo what I'd like to say that I'm very pleased that the benefits and welfare in-house facility is up and running now. It was a big change, and I think it's from what I read, it's been quite successful. So I'm pleased that that's happened. I also would like to echo what Councillor Galvin said, and thank the Citizens Advice Bureau for all their work that they've done over the last year, especially during the pandemic, and they've helped us out considerably as a council. So I think I'd like to add to Councillor Galvin's record that has been a very good thing. And again, the school meals, it's great to see that we're carrying on with the school meals, and we've done great things, especially during the holidays. So it's good that we can continue with that. So very, very good report. Thank you very much. So if you could just sort of come back on the council tax thing, that'd be great.
Yeah, so in respect to council tax, we're seeing the caseload increase, so that's going to obviously increase the expenditure. I do think the changes that we made to the scheme made it more accessible for people, and it made it, you know, the whole point of us when we looked at that and when we did that, it was to make sure that people were able to access it easier, they were able to see what they were entitled to. That barrier wasn't there because it's very clear from the front that what people would get and in what circumstance. So I think that helps. I think the change that we made where when people claim for universal credit, we treat that as a claim as well, and I think that has helped quite a bit. I also think that, yeah, just in general cost of living, we're just getting more people coming to us, you know, it's just busier and busier every time. So, and I think more people are trying to claim. So, yeah, that's what I believe. So I think there's a combination of reasons for that, for CTR. Katie would probably be best placed to explain how that would affect collection fund and things like that. In terms of the DHP, we actually continue to still have quite a high number of cases, again, purely because of cost of living. With the LHA rates the way they are, and with people not being able to afford it, we are inundated with applications. The team are doing as much as they can to prioritise and ensure that we are able to get the funds out to people that we need. And we continue to work with housing to identify the most critical cases. You know, we're doing all we can. I think it's just, you know, the state that, not the state that we're in, but the economy at the moment and the struggles that people are having. We are just seeing a real high increase in those discretionary applications because people need the help.
Thank you, Gemma. Kitty, would you like to comment?
Just really briefly, that the council tax reduction scheme is a cost to the council tax, which is taken out before we set the budget. So we recognise that before we set the budget. The actual council tax reduction scheme collection rate is tracking exactly with the general collection rate, so it's not any worse and it's not declining any faster than the collection rate across the council, and both are holding up pretty steady at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Perhaps a little bit of guidance on this one. There are 2 points I wanted to make. The question I put down for the DWP and notified the committee clerk of in advance was about benefit take-up campaigns. Now, you'll recall, Chair, I asked exactly the same question at the August meeting under the cost of living report. I no doubt you'll vividly remember that, and I think the officer replied at the time that some local work was being undertaken. My question was more in terms of how joined up we were with the DWP, in what circumstances they would instigate a benefit take-up campaign. Would they wait for the local authorities to approach them? Would they initiate something? So if officers are unable to answer those questions this evening because they were directed specifically at the DWP, I'm perfectly happy to accept a written answer. And on the subject of written answers, Chair, there appeared to be some form of miscommunication over the benefits advice. Perhaps the way of resolving that, because I find it confusing, housing associations, of course, give benefit advice to their own tenants. As Gemma says, we have social care input, although we have a central finance team. Might it be helpful if members had a short briefing note on the subject of benefit advice and how to access it, so that Councillor Prenter's genuine questions were fully addressed? Thanks very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Gemma, would you like to respond?
Yes, of course. I do have a response from the DWP for you, so I will read that out now. So the DWP have said the DWP promote most of their benefit updates on gov.uk, where external partners can keep up to date with campaigns and updates. Anyone accessing information on the website can sign up to receive alerts when new information is added. We also have partnership managers in every area who promote various benefits for working age claimants externally with our local providers. On occasions, DWP do provide benefits or support available on radio adverts. Every month, the DWP write a narrative and send to local newspapers to publish. Generally, communications are received and delivered online. We have also promoted the cost of living payments via work coaches in job centres, so people on welfare are aware of the payments that are due. We have welfare officers in various locations in communities across the borough and are continuously seeking new locations to offer outreach support. So that's from the DWP. In respect of us, we work with the people that we are helping with housing benefit. We are embarking on a council tax reduction take-up campaign following the cost of living strategy that Councillor Maple introduced in July. And that's being done using the new Lift platform that we've purchased as a part of that. So we are doing take-up campaigns. You will also see on medway.gov.uk that our comms team are really proactive at resharing things that the DWP do, so encouraging people to claim child benefit, pension credit and things like that. So we do try and promote anything that the DWPs are doing through our own comms as well. In terms of the update as to where people can receive benefits advice, yes, of course, I will provide something in writing.
Thank you, Chairman. Did you want to come back, Councillor Jones?
I try not to, Chair. That's very helpful. I just wonder if the DWP written report could be submitted to the committee clerk if it hasn't been already. I'm not suggesting he should reproduce it word for word, but, just a short note to be included in the minutes, please. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Last night we received a background report from our Treasury Management Consultants link outlining some of the problems within the environment around finance. And basically what they were talking about was that people are poorer now than they were previously. And it worries me when we have 3 local MPs voting 25 times for cuts to council services, and here we have absolutely problematic delivery. Now my question, and I'm not having a go at officers on this because I think you are dealing with something that you're not quite sure what the size of it is, and that is simply because there is no there's no way to know what you're going to be facing, because some figures are up, but we do know that with the cost of living crisis, there are people that are going to be coming to you. And I have two questions, but what I wanted to say is we really need to understand the background, and we need to understand that the biggest problem actually facing the British economy is not the cost of living and people telling us the wages are gone up, it's actually the lack of productivity. And if what we're doing here is not helping people for as long as we would have been able to, or as many people as we would have been able to under previous things, I don't think we are actually doing the economy any favours here. But my questions are two. Firstly, this decision, I quite understand, was supposedly made not to duplicate effort to service these people. Are we saving money to the council on that? How many clients have you anticipated that you'll be able to deal with? I'm very concerned, like Councillor Prenter, about the gap. And the gap that I'm worried about is the people who will not go to the council for advice. They're the very same people who may be in trouble to pay their bills, and they see the council as another authoritarian organisation, and therefore they won't come to them for advice. I know that you've said that there is some provision outside of this for people to be signposted to, but the people signposting them aren't going to be council officers. They may be members, and Councillor Jones has rightly asked about that. But my question is, how many people do you anticipate coming? How was the sizing done? And when was it done? And was it done in relation to a look at the economic forecasts for the economy, not just the council's funds? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Gemma. Oh, Katie, would you like to come in?
If that's all right. With respect, the paper that you've got tonight is about the service that we are delivering in partnership with the Department for Work and Pensions, and also about the service that we have been tasked with delivering for this council following the Cabinet decision in January. We have had some good communications with the previous contract holder, but we were not party to the decision to change that contract to an in-house service. So what we've done is we've taken the value of that contract and we've assumed that we need to spend that. There's no saving attached to this transfer in. So we've assumed that we will need to use the funds that were previously provided to the contract to deliver a service. And so we've assumed that if that was the service that was acceptable to the area up until now, we should be able to use that resource to deliver a service of the same calibre moving forward. That's our aim. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Phil, would you like to come in?
Yeah, and just to add to that, this is about providing a more holistic service. So it's linking it in with the benefits service that we already provide, but also, so it's creating a one-stop shop in-house. That's the rationale for doing this.
Thank you, Phil.
That's good if that's what we actually achieve. But it looks like we're doing it on reduced hours from what it would be possible to do, because a lot of it is going to be signposting and services delivered by other people. So I commend the intention, and I look forward to, and I wish officers success in actually doing it. But I'm like Councillor Prenter, a bit concerned about that actually it will be switching off against some people. And it's not anybody's fault in this room that other people might not avail themselves of it. But it's a worry.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Gemma, would you like to respond or comment?
No, well, nothing further to say, Chair, other than, you know, we're going to try our hardest. You know, like I say, we've got 3 people hopefully coming into the team. We're going to have a further 1. We've got a lot of welfare benefits and a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience in my team, not only from, you know, myself, the people that have worked in the council for years. We've got a Macmillan welfare benefits team. We've got a housing related support team. We're quite a strong and large unit now, so I am optimistic that we will be able to drive this forward and do what we can and what we want to for the residents of Medway.
Thank you, Gemma. Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. I need to ask a question and then just follow up on it. So on 6.3, the current caseload, 16320, on average, how long does it take to deal with each case, please?
Sorry, can you repeat the paragraph that you were referring to?
6.3, the council tax reduction claims. You've got down there current caseload of 16,320. Just wanted to know, on average, for each case, how long does it normally take?
So that varies. So that's our static caseload. So that's the amount of claims we have at any one time as of that date. When a new claim comes in, it depends on the circumstances. So we give, if the new claim's made, we give customers 1 calendar month to provide all the information that we need. So sometimes it can take that long in time to get the information from the customer. In terms of actually processing the claim, probably about an hour per claim. And then obviously we will have change of circumstances and things throughout the month, because universal credit can change for people monthly. So we get universal credit notifications monthly in respect of our claims. So we have updates for that. We've recently invested in some automation which will enable us to process those quicker and easier. All that's providing is efficiency and automation, so using the technology to be able to process those claims as quick as we can.
Okay, so if we're taking on the hour situation, just working out the sums, that would be nearly 8 full-time employees for the whole year just to deal with that caseload.
At the very least, yeah.
Yeah.
At the very least.
Do we have that amount of staff dealing with it, or is the likelihood we're going to keep falling behind?
Oh, we do. We have those. We have at least 8 people, and obviously the same people are dealing with housing benefit as well. So we have approximately 17 full-time equivalent staff. No problem.
Thank you, Councillor Joy, and thank you for your answer, Gemma. I have no other member, so we'll go to Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move recommendation 1.1 at page 13. 1.1, the committee notes the work referenced in the report and also notes the call for a briefing note on benefit advice and who gives it and to whom.
That takes us on to agenda item 6. I've been advised that Councillor Osborne will arrive later tonight, so we will go to agenda item 7 and come back to him later. Agenda item 7, the Council Plan Performance Monitoring Report and Strategic Risk Summary. I ask Nicola Trainer, Head of Council Planning and Programs, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the performance summary against the council programmes, climate change and Medway, a great place to live, work, learn and visit, and the council values for Q2, July to September 2023. This report also sets out the latest review of the strategic risks relevant to this committee, together with the mitigation in place to minimise impact and likelihood. There are no changes to the strategic risk scores for this quarter. Cabinet received a Q2 performance monitoring report and strategic risk summary at the meeting on the 21st of November. Members are asked to consider the Q2 performance and to note the Q2 strategic risk summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Do we have any member? Councillor Goldwyn.
Thank you, Chair. I find it rather strange. We've got a bar on page 35 of the agenda, which gives RAG ratings. But when we go down to the actual report, there's no RAG ratings, there's no KPIs, there's no means of judging performance. I know we're in the process of producing a new plan. But why have we got this rather bald report before us this evening? We're accustomed to having a report that gives us an indication whether our services are doing well or not so well, so members can make a judgment. All we've got is the normal written report that we had.
Thank you, Councillor Govan. Nicola, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so you're correct, Councillor Govan. There are no performance measures specifically assigned to these two programmes. So the report provides the narrative updates as at Q2.
I'll come back, Chair. When we get the next quarters, can we expect the normal service to be resumed?
Phil, would you like to come in?
The answer to that is no. We're not. What we've found and what we've been saying to this committee is that discussion has focused on areas that are not within the remit of this committee, and it becomes a pointless conversation because the officers that are in the room end up saying, "I'll have to take that one away." So what we've tried to do is amend the report so that it only reports the things that fall within the remit of this committee. And as Nicola said, the activity that falls within the remit of this committee doesn't have any performance metrics associated with it that we report through the performance plan.
Thank you, Phil. Do we have any other member? I have no other member. Over to you, Vice. Sorry. Councillor Louis Laprinter.
Yeah, I was just checking. What I was going to ask was actually in your report because I've got a bit mixed up with them there, and I think it is. I've just been up and down and checking, and it was just a quick question about the project officer who's dedicated to electric vehicles. Is that your report? No, your report. It's this report, though, isn't it? Right. Okay. It was just to ask when we will have an outcome of that, because it says there it's currently in progress, but actually I've got residents asking about charging points where they live. So is there a date when you might know when you'll have that information? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor. Part of the approach with climate change is this cross-cutting function. So I have to be careful not to speak on behalf of other ed services that do that. I can get an exact date for you. As you'll see from the notes, it's a fairly new recruit, and we've got the earmarked money that's come from government. It's about best place doing that. The portfolio holder for climate change is very keen, like you, to see this ability to join the electric car club cascaded throughout Medway. So it's very much on our priority, and I'll speak to the team. We'll get you an update with some sort of timescale, having regard that it's a new role, and he's quite reasonably getting to grips with that function and the lay of the land. And there are lots of competing demands on that service. But I think I'd join you and the climate change team would in saying it's essential that that's provided throughout Medway, regardless of the housing stock you live in. Of course.
Thank you, Paul. Do we have any other member? Before you, Vice Chair, just one from me, Paul. With regards to SR 37.02, network security. Just curious to understand whether there have been any incidents, and if so, how severe, and what has been put in place to prevent reoccurrence.
Sorry, Chair, could you point me to where? Can you repeat where you said it was?
SR 37.02, network security.
It's the strategic risk. I don't think I can answer that question today, but I will take it away.
Thank you. Paul.
So the website is constantly monitored. We've constantly got firewalls, antivirus protection, and we constantly monitor what's happening with the website. There's been no major incidents recently. There was an issue where the website's trawled for email addresses and published email addresses on the website, which unfortunately affected members, because members have their email addresses on the website. It was an attempt to log into those accounts, but the fail-safe mechanisms kicked in after a number of failed attempts. The account's locked out, which is then reset, which I know many members and officers had to do, but that was part of the protection on the website. So we've identified it, and mitigation has been put in place since to prevent that happening again, and touch wood, since those, I think it was a couple of weeks, we had some issues. It's settled down now.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Lawrence, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question, just a comment, Chair. I had an excellent briefing from Paul and another member of the team, and this network security issue came up in amongst those discussions, and I was, impressed with the level of security that the council have to protect not only the websites but also council data as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a comment before I ask the question. And I would thank Councillor Lawrence for going to see how IT is managed in the council. From your position previously, it is very heartwarming to see that once you understood what we're doing, what officers are doing at the council, that your recommendation for outsourcing is kind of not as high on your agenda as previously. And that's just a comment, and that's thank you for that. My question actually is probably for Phil, and this is maybe my ignorance about what should be in this, and it's SR 5301A, which is about the presenting, the risk is presenting briefings. No, the mitigation is to present briefings to service managers to ensure understanding of the model, engaging them in settling the levels to meet SR 5301A. And I'm wondering if those briefings can be extended to highlight the role of internal audit in our business and finance management. Sorry, Phil, it's on page 45.
Page 45.
45. Sorry. The risk is 53 point. SR 5301A, yeah? I was just wondering that in the briefings to managers, which is the mitigation against the risk, if we could highlight the role of internal audit, which has been reported previously as to be not something that managers are necessarily as aware of as they might be, and that's a genuine. I don't know whether it fits in there or somewhere else, but I would have expected that we need to make sure that managers are aware of kind of all the financial risks and all the things that we can do to mitigate them. And internal audit is a huge weapon in that.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Councillor Brown. Phil.
Right, I'm still not entirely sure the genesis of that question, but our internal audit team do meet with the whole organisation when they're setting their work programme for the year ahead, and so they meet with DMTs to discuss the risks that they want to explore through their audit programme. So, I mean, is that what you're talking about? I'm sorry if I'm not understanding the question.
All I'm asking is that the role of internal audit, when these other briefings are happening, that is mentioned within the briefing. I'm not asking internal audit to go out twice to people, or it's just that if we could increase the profile of internal audit. It is a hugely successful service, and it is, as you know, more than I know, hugely valuable. And I was only asking if it could be included. I know it's a small point, but maybe it could be just included in these briefings as well.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, point taken. My comment was just to assure you that the organisation is aware of that we've got an internal audit function and how it can be used by the organisation to improve things. So.
Thank you, Phil. Do we have Councillor Cook?
Thank you. I just wondered generally if there were any specific challenges of the temporary closures at Gun Wharf to things like cybersecurity, data protection, whether we needed to put any other measures in place kind of in addition to this report because of more people working in different locations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to comment, Nicola?
This report is specifically for Q2, so July to September, so any risks around associated with the current state of the building will appear in the Q3, but locally, absolutely, those risks are being managed. I think you will see more of that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members. I don't have any other questions, so over to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendations 1.1 at page 33 that the committee notes the Q2 2023-24 performance against the measures used to monitor progress against the Council's priorities. 1.2, the committee notes the Q2 2023-24 strategic risk summary at Appendix 2.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is that seconded? Councillor Jones. Agreed? Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 8, Capital Budget Monitor Round 2, 2023-2024. I'll ask Dave Reynolds, Head of Revenue Accounts, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this report details the results of the second round of capital monitoring relating to the schemes within the remit of this committee. The report was presented to Cabinet on the 21st of November and has been considered by both the Corporate and Directorate Management teams based on returns submitted by the budget managers. Section 5 on page 58-59 contains information for all directorates just for context. Table 1 in section 5.1 details the financial summary for the capital programme, and Table 2 on the following page details the associated funding streams associated with that budget. The result of the second round of monitoring is a projected overspend of £216,000 across the whole council, but there are none relating to schemes within the remit of this committee. Section 6 on pages 59 and 60 gives further details as to the progress of each scheme within the business support and digital service area, as well as a summary of the funding streams. Finally, Section 7 on page 60 details the changes to the capital programme since round 1 monitoring. So officers will be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dave. Do we have any member? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on Councillor Brown's point, actually, about outsourcing and of ICT services. The council spent a lot of money improving those services, and when you get into the bunker of the data centre, it's quite an impressive place. But I'd ask that officers come up with a strategy that we find ways of monetarising that investment outside the council. I think there's a big opportunity, particularly to offer that service to other public sector clients. I know we're already doing that, but I think it may need a bit of revenue support to give officers the capacity to come up with a plan and then to go sell that plan. For those of you who haven't been there, it's worth a visit. It's almost like something out of James Bond when you go in there. But it's an enormous area, and with the improvements in technology, the amount of space being taken up has got lesser and lesser. So there is actually a huge capacity to be offering that service to other clients. And as the team pointed out to me, that money's then invested, the profit or do we say surplus in local authority, surplus, thank you, is then reinvested into things like the Medway 2.0 project. So I hope officers can support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would you like to respond, Dave? Katie?
We wholeheartedly concur, and yeah, we would love to be able to grow that service in such a way that it generates additional income to the council. Yes.
Chair, I think it's just coming up the extra, making sure there's capacity to do that, because everyone's working at 99.999% capacity. Without the capacity, you won't come up with a plan, and you won't be able to execute the plan. So that's the key point.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Do we have any other member? Okay, just one from me. On the 6.1, page 59, it states the projected outturn for business support is expected to be contained within the budget. However, further on the report, I note you mentioned that there are price fluctuations and that managers were keeping the eye on this. However, you have not provided us with any information on how you are mitigating against this risk, the price fluctuation risk. So can you please tell us what you're doing to ensure that this vital project will be delivered on time and within budget?
If I may, Chair, so the comments that we report through the capital budget monitoring are the results of what the services have told us. So I'd have to speak to the service to find out exactly what they're doing. But the fundamental thing for us is that I think what they're pointing out is that there may be some volatility in prices, but they're not at this point projecting that that will result in an overspend. I'd have to speak to the person who actually did the forecast to give you any more detail on that, I'm afraid.
Thank you. If we can have a briefing on that, that would be very helpful. Any other member? Vice Chair, we have a recommendation on page 57.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 on page 57. The committee notes the results of the second round of capital budget monitoring for 2023-24. The committee notes the changes made to the capital programme are set out in 7.1 to the district report, and also notes the call for a briefing note. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is that seconded? Councillor Jones. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 9, Revenue Budget Monitoring 2023-2024, round 2. I ask Dave Reynolds, Head of Revenue Account, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this is the second round of budget monitoring for the revenue side this time. Again, it was presented to Cabinet on the 21st of November and summarises the revenue budget monitoring position that's been considered by the Director Management teams for the second round of monitoring. The result of that process is a projected overspend of just over £12.25 million across the Council, of which £1.1 million relates to the business support and centralised services areas within the remit of this committee. Although the overall position across the Council is an improvement of just over £5 million from the position reported at round 1, as previously reported, the Council's general reserves currently stand at just over 10 million, so the Council would not be in a position to kind of fund an overspend on that scale that's currently projected. As previously, Cabinet has agreed the recommendation for CMT to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget by full Council, but I won't do any more in terms of an introduction and just open up to questions.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Huckwell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I'd just like to clarify a few things. You say that we're 12 million over to budget effectively round 2. Just to refresh my memory, I believe that round 2 last year we were 14 million over budget, which was a worsening from round 2. You've just said there's a better position than round 1 last year. So, yeah, the 12 million, we were at 14 million this time last year, which which is it's business as usual, really. You know, round one, I think we were 13 million last year. Round two, we were 14 million. So, and this time round, we were 17 and down to 5. So, you know, down to 12. So an improvement of 5. So I think, you know, we need to stop peddling the rhetoric that we're broke and going bust. We heard last night at the audit committee that, you know, we're struggling to refinance some of our debt because the world believes that we're going bust, which is not the case. So I think we need to actually be clear on our messages that we're putting out to the public and to the world at large, that we're not in a big mess that we were. It's business as usual. You mentioned the reserves. Reserves, we've got 10 million in reserves, which if I go back 4 or 5 years, we virtually had nothing in reserve. You know, so the position we're in is still a lot better than we were for reserves 4 or 5 years. So we are painting a very bad picture, which is sort of normal, business as normal. I think the other thing I'd like to understand is where are we with the property rationalisation? It's been a project that's been going on for a long time now, and we're overspent, and I'd like to know where we are on that project. It gets mentioned, but that's about it. The further thing that I'd like to understand is how we can be 134,000 overspent on members' expenses. You know, the reason given in the report says that there's an extra 4 councillors. Well, we knew that before we set the budget. We also knew and allowed for, and the other reason it says for the members' sort of increase in allowances. Well, the increase in allowances is based on the increase of the salary, the average salary of the employees of the council, which we allowed for in the budget. So I don't understand how any budget can be 134,000 wrong for members' allowances. So I'd like some explanation on that if I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hackwell. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. Okay, so you've made references to the fact that we've been in this position before, and that's true. Our monitoring does, in previous years, reflect a forecast overspend position, and it's on the back of revealing that forecast that we then take management action. We have those conversations with colleagues and portfolio holders, and the overspend comes down. But just to, I suppose, clarify the position that you referred to last year. Yes, we were reporting 14 million. I'm doing it off the top of our head here, but 14 million pound at around this time last year. By the end of the year, on the back of management action, freezing non-essential spend, holding vacancies, all of that kind of usual stuff that we do. That forecast reduced to a position where we outturned £6 million overspent. That was against a budget that was underpinned by nearly £5 million of use of reserves. So that meant at the end of last financial year, we used £11 million of reserves. So that takes us on to the position that you referenced, our reserves. You're right, if you go back to 2018, our reserves were very low. I think they were about 5 million actually. They weren't at 0. We had 5 million, but nothing above that. Now, over the course of recent years, we have built those reserves up to the non-earmarked reserves I'm talking about here. We've built those up to a level where at March 22, they were at £26 million. Which was the highest that I can ever remember them being. So that was a really good place to be. But obviously last year, the pressures that we were experiencing in the statutory services and the fact that there was very little coming out of the settlement in terms of additional resources, certainly not enough, we ended up overspending by the 6 million plus the 5 million use of reserves. And so £11 million worth of those reserves were eaten up in one fell swoop. In addition, we also had to set funding aside in an earmark reserve as part of the safety valve deal that we've agreed with Department for Education. And there were a couple of other commitments against those non-earmark reserves. So our non-earmarked reserves then went back down to £10 million at the start of this financial year. If we overspend to the forecast level, £12 million, that more than wipes out our non-earmarked reserves. And even if we move, our forecasts move to the extent that they did last year, so a halving of them, say, down to £5 million, that's still a massive hit on our non-earmarked reserves that is just not sustainable going forward. So I know it feels like we say this every year, but I think our capacity as an organisation to stop spending on non-essential spend, I think our budgets largely are starting to reflect essential spend, and it's really difficult to actually make the reductions in expenditure necessary to close that gap year on year. So I hear what you're saying, but it just gets harder and harder every year, and I think we are in a really seriously difficult position this year.
Thank you, Phil.
The members' allowances. Do you want me to deal with the members' allowances as well?
Yes, we'd like to deal with members' allowance.
Sorry, I forgot about that one. The members' allowances, we hadn't built that additional cost into our budgeting because it's based on a panel decision. An independent panel reviews members' allowances. That is the case, isn't it?
Sorry, we'd like to come back, Councillor Harper.
Yes, sure. There is the panel doesn't sit every year. There's a review, and they put a system in place, I think 3 years ago, which the members' allowances is based on the average salary of employees of the council. And then, depending on what that salary is, that's how the allowances are increased.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Katie, would you like to comment?
Sorry, it's not so much the actual value of the allowances going up so much as that in sort of 4,000 odd cost centres when we built the budget, we missed the addition of the 4 members, right? So the gap is coming from something that we just made an officer's mistake.
Thank you.
And the only other question was about the property rationalisation review, which, not to throw to you, Phil, but it's a corporate management team colleague who's leading on that, isn't it? Not a business support function.
Yeah, it's not. So it's the property review you're talking about, yeah. Yeah. We're looking at our rationalisation of our property because it'll help us to balance the budget. Property strategy is being led by Sunny E's team, the property team there. So David England's leading on that. We've also got a review of our integrated hub. They've got an integrated hubs programme, which is looking at our satellite offices. That's a project that's kind of cross-authority that we're looking to rationalise there as well. Is that what you're kind of referring to? Yeah.
Thank you, colleagues. Councillor Brown.
I think Phil has actually answered quite a lot of this. But my comment is actually about telling the facts. There's nothing wrong with doing that. The problem that we did discuss last night about some of the industry not willing to lend us money might have been because of this is business as usual running. But I think it's more about actually the press trying to make out that there is a bigger picture than there is. The truth has been told in the figures. And we've always, around this side of the House, and I'm sure on that side of the House, always wanted to deal in the facts first. And they can't be disputed, but they can, of course, be written in such a way in the press that it makes us seem as if we're not doing a good job and that officers aren't doing a good job. And I said it last night, we're in a very difficult situation financially, but we shouldn't use any kind of reason to think that anybody isn't trying to make this as good as it can be. Unfortunately, the environment outside of the council doesn't make this easy for us. And I'm not going to go over old ground on 91% cuts or anything like that. I'm not. All I'm saying is we are where we are. And I said it last night, Councillor Hackwell. We are dealing with this as honestly, as openly and transparently as you know we are, because you sit on audit committee as well. And that's what this is doing.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Brown must have missed Councillor Maple talking about Section 114, and then the debacle over the Christmas lights made it look like the coffers were empty. So I think, you know, forgive the Labour group because they're new to administration, but actually Councillor Maple did make that mistake, not the press. Councillor Maple started talking about Section 114. Chair, I've got an actual question. It's good to see that in terms of the legal team, we have made some savings of 203,000, but the comment is that the vacancy rate remains high, but the council took specific action to amend pay scales. I'm wondering, of the 203,000 improvement, is that just the releasing of agency staff, or is it agency staff transferring to the new pay scales? So I'm just trying to get a feeling. And the current overspend is £896,000, which is still an enormous sum of money. Are the pay scales the change in the pay scales going to address that overspend, or is that just going to look like a bit of a failure at the end of the financial year? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Dave, would you like to respond?
Yes, so in terms of the reason why it's changed, I believe it is largely due to the fact that obviously this was only just recently embedded, and obviously it hasn't had time to kind of take effect. There probably is something around the fact that we're able to kind of engage people on permanent contracts more as a result of those changes. I'm pretty certain that actually, obviously, as we go through next year, that will make a greater impact on where we are. And certainly the projections we've got and what we've built into the budget for next year kind of reflects the fact that we anticipate there would still be a pressure around legal services. So we've built in the pressure for the enhanced kind of pay rates for the legal staff. So that should hopefully address that issue going forward. And hopefully between now and kind of when we report round 3, round 4, and get the outturn position, the position around the legal team will improve further.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you. Can we for the next, because we have so little to discuss at this committee, we might as well pack it out with some other items. Can we just have a brief report on changes in the legal team in terms of their employment contracts, just to demonstrate that the change in pay scales is succeeding? Because all due respect, I know you don't have the information to hand, but the answer sounded just a fraction woolly. But if we could actually have a report that shows that some people are moving from being a contractor to a member of staff. Otherwise, I think Councillor Van Daan gave me an assurance at full council that this was already having an impact. But I don't think we're addressing the overspend. And I think there's another point that I've raised on a number of different occasions, is about productivity of the staff. Are the staff as productive as they can be, given the working from home, the roof falling in at Gunwharf, and the increase in the caseload? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Phil, would you like to come in?
What Dave was trying to explain with the legal staff is that we are forecasting a massive overspend at the moment because of the amount of locums, but it's not simply because we've got locums in substantive roles. There's not enough legal staff to service the demand that's coming from children's services. So the paper that Bhupinder took to Cabinet to seek an increase in it it's a number of things, an increase in its establishment, but also to pay them in accordance with the market commercial rate, right? So there's two elements to that cost increase. And by agreeing that, it won't make the overspend go away, it will just reduce the overspend until we reset the base. So in our budget for next year, we've built in the cost of the increased establishment at the higher rates of pay. Now, because we've done that, we're hoping, and Bhupinder's going through a recruitment at the moment, to appoint substantive permanent posts there which means we won't be paying the locum premium. So we should see next year legal services being able to remain within budget. But this year, all we're managing to do is reduce the overspend. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think the worrying thing is the increase in caseload then, isn't it? Yeah, where that caseload is coming from and what the projections are going forward on that caseload.
I think we're reaching a peak now in terms of children's services. So it's gone through the improvement journey. We're seeing, well, you can see it between round 1 and round 2 monitoring, that the forecasts around children's placement costs are actually starting to come down. Still a massive risk, and we get them coming out the woodwork, big ones that the courts award significant packages that then have an impact on our forecast.
And just the productivity point, I think is real. I know it's difficult because we don't know how to monitor productivity, but we need to make sure we're as productive as we can be, because it ultimately feeds into the, you know, if we're only as 80% efficient as we were before COVID, it just feeds into the bigger establishment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Phil.
Well, I mean, all I can say is from my perspective, I'm not seeing that. I'm getting far more from my team. I've got about 450 people that work in my division, and I'm not seeing a fall off in productivity as a result of the hybrid working. And actually, because my team largely works in a hybrid way, even the issues with the building are not so significantly impacting on my productivity. I can't speak for the wider organisation at this point.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I just wanted to comment favourably on what the Cabinet and senior management team have done to bring down the projected overspend. And, you know, I think we should observe that progress has been made without getting complacent. And I am a little bit concerned about complacency. One member opposite, not at this meeting, but at a previous meeting, a former cabinet member described the then projected overspend as a £17 million story. Well, you know, I'm sorry, it's not a story. It was a reality, but with the efforts of the senior politicians and management team, progress has been made, but we shouldn't get complacent. We are still in a serious situation, and I think we need to work on that. And we are working on that. Just one observation on Councillor Lawrence's comments about productivity. I think these are questions for line managers to ensure that the work is being covered from home or wherever. I actually think the staff deserve some praise for rising to a lot of praise probably, for rising to the challenge and being able to adapt to the situation at Gun Wharf and pick up working from home where they might well have left off pre-pandemic, or during the pandemic period, to be more accurate. So all in all, I think it's important not to get negative, not to get complacent, but to recognise the improvements which have been made. I've no specific questions for the officers, Chair.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Jones. Councillor Goldman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sometimes I wouldn't call it complacency, but certainly this, I do have a feeling of deja vu, because having been a cabinet member for 8 years, and every year we've had exactly the same scenario, eye-watering gap budget pressure at Q1, and usually by Q4, most years, that budget gap has been closed. In fact, in numerous years, there's been a contribution to reserves. But let's go back to where we are today. Yes, it's very good we've had that £5 million reduction in the gap, and I believe that is a result of a lot of hard work by the officers. But I'm intrigued to know how much of that closing of the gap has been of the work of the administration. The only difficult decisions that have been announced by the administration was the scrapping of the Christmas light scheme, which is £75,000, which is 0.4% of 17 million I worked out, and also scrapping the free parking on Mondays. I've asked numerous officers how much the saving is, or how much money we get back by having the free parking on Mondays, but nobody has been able to give me an answer. So it seems to me there's been a lot of work gone on by the officers behind the scenes, but just a load of rhetoric and bovine excretions from the administration when it comes to solving this gap. Where are these difficult decisions that have been made by the administration? I thought you'd be shouting them from the rooftops by now. It seems to me there's been a lot of work done by officers, and I congratulate the officers for the hard work that's been done in this reducing this budget by 5 million. But I'd be intrigued to know how much of that is the result of the work of the administration.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Galvin. Councillor Jones, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair. I don't want this to develop into a ping-pong between both sides, because I don't think that's the way a scrutiny committee should work. But really, we have to remember where the original 17 million deficit originated. We're still working on the budget, which was determined in February 2023. And the Labour and Co-op group have yet to introduce a budget. But nevertheless, we're making good progress in the situation that we inherited. May I say, you know, Councillor Galvin talks about work behind the scenes. Portfolio holders don't necessarily issue a press release every time that they've achieved a reduction in the projected overspend. A lot of this work is behind the scenes, and it's just got on with, and we're getting on with dealing with the situation inherited.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Hubbard. Councillor Hubbard.
Sorry. Well, that, I have to say, is an admission by Councillor Galvin, is how the previous administration operated. Behind the scenes by officers. So in other words, he was a portfolio holder, like many other portfolios, were hands off and let all the officers do all the hard work. And they just took the credit. Just because a couple of things have come to the surface, which are quite minor, behind the scenes, my colleagues on the current cabinet are working hard to reduce the overspend which is coming forward. I got the feeling that Councillor Galvin and his fellow portfolio holders up to May did nothing behind the scenes. They just let the officers run things and let things get out of control. And Councillor Lawrence says, oh, it's the leader of the council mentioned Section 114 notices. Well, some years ago, Mr. Watts came along and did a presentation to the then Labour group, and we talked about 114 notices, and they're ongoing every year. I'm quite sure there's an envelope to one side where Mr. Watts has got a letter ready to go if need be. But it's not this item, but item 10, look at 16, risk management. Look at the first row. And there it goes. The risk is, if the council fails to deliver a balanced budget, it becomes necessary for the Section 511 officer, Mr. Watts, to issue a Section 114 report. So the risk is there all the time. The idea that somehow Councillor Maple just made it up is a nonsense. It's there, and it's happening. And I'm quite sure my colleagues will do their very best to get that overspend down.
Thank you, Councillor Hubbard. Thank you for your comments. Would you like to respond, Phil?
I thought Councillor Galvin asked officers to respond to that. So I think in terms of the solutions, so I said this earlier, when we report the monitoring, what that's doing is saying, as of today, based on our activity today, if we carry on like that, we will overspend. It's a forecast. But by doing that, it signals to the organisation that it needs to act, and that's what happens. So by the time you get to if we were still reporting the same overspend the next time round, you'd wonder if we were sitting on our hands, wouldn't you, as an organisation? So that's why the forecast comes down over time, and it typically does. In terms of who's taking that action, it's a mixture, because there's a lot of things that once the budget is set, that directors have delegated authority to make decisions about. So some of that management action is management teams sitting down and taking a decision to do less of something or do something differently. But there are other decisions, and you alluded to the removal of the free parking on a Monday. Now, officers wouldn't do that, take that kind of action on their own. So that would have been a conversation with the portfolio holder and members about taking that action. And I think we expected that would save about 75, or generate an additional income of £75,000, to answer your very specific question.
Well, if I may come back, Chair, so those two actions then are 0.8% of the 17 million budget gap. I think I've made my point.
Thank you, Councillor Govan. Councillor Might.
Councillor Govan makes the point about what he sees as a relatively small amount of money. And obviously, as part of your discussions with DLUC, I assume, you are looking at basically everything, paper clips upwards, to save as much money as possible. So small amounts of money are important. Interestingly, when you talk about £75,000, that's 3 people's salary. You've made a big fuss about, for example, earlier on about Christmas lights. Would you have preferred 3 council members of staff having to say to their kids at Christmas, sorry, you've got no Christmas presents, you've got no turkey, because I've had to be turfed out of my job? And it's quite interesting, actually, as well, that Councillor Lawrence makes a big fuss about it as well, because I know Councillor Lawrence is a big fan, as I'm sure are several other people on the opposite side, of Margaret Thatcher. And I'm not sure necessarily Margaret Thatcher would have been necessarily thinking that, Christmas lights were necessarily a priority. She was a big fan of small government, and it seems to me that Christmas lights are perhaps a bit more big government.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Any other member? I don't have any other members, so over to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 at page 63. The committee notes the results of the second round of revenue budget monitoring for 2023-24. The committee notes that the Cabinet instructed the corporate management team to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by full council. Further note, a briefing note and a report on changes in the legal team.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Is that seconded? Councillor Jones, is that agreed? Our members, that bring us back to agenda item 16. I'd like to welcome Councillor Osborne. And I'd like to ask him if he would like to make any comments in relation to his report prior to questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and can I also thank you for your patience this evening, for all members' patience this evening. I am late. I have been at a parents' evening with my capacity in my other hat as head of department. So I appreciate your patience, and without further ado. So first of all, this is members will note this is amongst the first time you've had a chance to have a look at a report of a similar nature around Medway 2.0 and the digital agenda. And this is something which comes very close to my heart, something I wrote a master's thesis on many years ago around digital government and how we can promote engagement online and using technologies to basically streamline and improve the public realm. And so it was with great pleasure that the leader of the council made a decision to effectively make this a key part of our agenda as an administration, to digitalise and to improve the digital engagement with our residents across Medway. And this is where this was born, and partly the reason why this committee has changed name, and also the focus for our administration to improve the digital environment that we have. And I hope through this report you can see a theme here. Much of this is building on the excellent work which was done previously. I will put my hands up. This is a legacy of digital transformation that has been engaged in this organisation through Phil Watts' team, who've done some outstanding work in the past. I know Paul Boyd here has welcomed me on board with his digital hat on. He's been incredibly persuasive. He's provided me with all the information, and some of it, you can read some of the language here I've struggled with initially, and he's been patient with me as well. And so I want to thank all of the officers right now and at the start of this for all of the work that they've done in putting this work together, and the work they continue to do every single day. And they are a simply amazing team under Phil, and you know, I can't speak highly enough of them. Without further ado, I welcome contributions from all members across the aisle. In the spirit of openness, I might not have all the answers, but I'm willing to get the answers for you if I can't answer those questions. I have my colleague here, Paul, who is a specialist in some of this domain knowledge, and so I might access him for occasional answers as well. But I'm now open to the floor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Llewellyn-Printer.
Thank you, welcome. Thank you for the report. My question's really about the Report It pilot, and you say in your report you've got 3 areas that it's covering, and there'll be a further release that adds in services such as apply it, book it, pay for it in the future. Will you be looking to expand it for more than those 3 areas? For example, rubbish, fly tipping, things like that to report, as people could with the Love Medway app? And will it be something that is just heavily reliant on residents to use, or will actual council workers who are out in the streets be using it as well? Because I've seen traffic wardens step over rubbish to ticket a car and ignore it. And actually, if that was a really quick, easy app to use, they might use it, rubbish people might use it to, you know, the refuse collectors could use it. Any officers that are out on the streets, or any not officers necessarily, but any workers who could use it without impacting their daily work, because that would take a lot of, they're out more than a lot of residents are walking about. So that's my question. How far are you going to go with it?
Thank you, Councillor Printer. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, so first of all, thank you very much for your question. So I'm going to take this in 3 parts, if I may. So first of all, the app is part of a wider change of transformation across our digital space. So we're working in close partnership actually with Microsoft as a key partner with them to effectively reduce the number of platforms we're using to basically use the Microsoft suite. Now that was signed up to by our predecessors, and it was an outstanding suite of programs. And with that program, we're now moving towards a platform of report, as you've noted, an online platform of reporting. Now, that will take different guises over a period of time. So initially, the thought processes that I came with was, well, what are the public doing with us at the moment through customer services? What are they using our customer services for? What are the large number or the bulk number of phone calls about? And that has led us down that frontline services route around reporting fly tipping, reporting cars that might be inappropriate. And so that's where we've kind of steered the immediate frontline services element of this. However, this is not closed, okay? We're looking to streamline all of our services over a period of time, and we've used the Report It element because that would appear to be the most it's closely aligned with Fix My Street and other types of platforms where people have easy access on their phones and websites to do that. But actually, we could digitalise a lot of our services. That doesn't mean as an alternative. We still would have the phone services for people who didn't access online. But actually, paying council tax online now is something we promote and we should be encouraging. Buying tickets for events is something we're really keen to promote. providing perhaps educational awareness and guidance around street works is potentially something we could liaise with in the future as well, so that people get up-to-date information on roadworks. Some of this data, by the way, is already accessible on Google and other platforms. So again, we could be looking at that. And what I'm saying is that whilst this is the initial tranche of this programme we're delivering, we will learn from all of this process, and it might be that we look at other opportunities in the future. I can't tell you a firm timeline on what those might be and what they might look like. That's for the department to give that commentary. But I'm absolutely seeking to push this as far as possible. And a number of other local authorities are already doing this, and they are seeing a reduction in demand on other services as a result, because people can access that. On your second question around will council officers be able to use this as well as the public, obviously I want both to be able to use this platform. The Microsoft suite that we're using at the moment is extremely accessible. It is widely used across local government and actually in the private sector as well. We're using it right now in some cases for our email system and others at a more basic level, but actually having all systems on Microsoft means they communicate with each other better. And what I'm hoping is it will be accessible to the public, it will be easy for the public to use, and also council officers will, over the course of time, move from their legacy databases and systems all onto Microsoft, so that all of those systems are communicating with each other. So it is my hope and my vision and vision for anyone who works in this space is to have that streamless customer interface with our resident and also the person who works here. And just lastly, just around where I see this in future, I would hope within a 4-year period that, with this trial, we'll learn from some of the mistakes. Hopefully there won't be any, but with anything in IT, there will be some things that will crop up. We'll look at some of those. We have to work with our departments within the council, so we'll obviously take advice from them around when they would like to transition across to these new ways of working. And I just want to reiterate to those people watching, this is not an alternative to telephone services or going into your library or other ways of accessing this service. This is something which many residents are already doing online. This is an expectation, in my view, that we have that digital realm environment that does engage with residents. And I think if we fail to do this, we're not keeping up to date with where things are going, but actually we're letting people down, because I think that expectation is already there. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Goldwyn.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Osborne, for a very interesting report. I must say the report outlines an impressive list of achievements in digital transformation and business change. But what I'm struggling to find in that report is that anything that is new since May. That's my first question. My second question is, the digital transformation and business change reduced the council expenditure by the end of the last financial year by £12 million. That's £12 million permanently taken out of the budget. What do you estimate will be added to that £12 million saving by the end of this financial year? And also, could you explain your rationale in scrapping the transformation board that produced that £12 million saving? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Goldwyn, sorry. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so on that last question first, it wasn't me, of course, that did scrap the transformation board. That was a collective decision. And obviously, we have other processes that we go through to make large decisions. All is transparent and according to local government processes, and you can watch those at Cabinet as well. On the particular element, I did mention at the start of this meeting that many of the work that we're doing is actually a legacy, an inherited legacy. So we have seen lots of work that we're building on. I think there's a slight difference on emphasis. Okay, so while some of this was happening under the previous administration, what I inherited was a subgroup. It was a committee subgroup that very rarely really met to engage on issues. And I think it was set up at the time to deal with concerns around the website specifically. So now, forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but that is, but actually I think what most members can see here is a complete emphasis shift. Okay, the fact that I'm sat here talking about the digital agenda, the fact that the committee is renamed, that's a superficial change, but the fact that you're also having and engaging with people who are IT professionals in this meeting and we're able to have a conversation about what sort of digital platform that we want to present to the public. And actually, I think that's an important shift in mindset that I'm hopeful, this next 3 years, we're looking to continue with this agenda, and I'm hopeful this will now become a legacy for future administrations as well, because the digital transformation, the digital shift is happening, whether or not members like this or not. That is the world that our children are moving into, and that is what we would be expected to be doing. I know that from my other career. The digital agenda is extremely important. And so that legacy itself is one of the things from the agenda. In terms of where I've been able to input and feedback, I mean, clearly we've been working very closely with Microsoft. I met them at we brought them to the away day, which members were able to meet Microsoft there. We've been partnering very closely with them on some of the priority issues. So, for instance, the report it function being aligned to frontline services. That isn't a coincidence. That's also my other portfolio as well, to make sure that both departments within the council are very closely watched to make sure that they deliver that agenda. So there is some active management there. In terms of the budget, of course, the budget that this year, we will look to deliver this year's budget, and we will look to ensure that that is the case. I can't talk about future budgets because obviously that is not my realm and responsibility, and that will be subject to full council next year. So, and subject to our financial position, which of course is continuously changing, I can't talk or project future budgets. However, I can say that in the previous round of transformation, they were looking at a £4 million saving. But again, that is the figure that I inherited, and we're looking forward is for the future, it's for the budget, Phil Watts here and others, to set the budget for next year that I will be working within.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Goldman, would you like to come back?
Yes, I would. Well, that was a long explanation of nothing new. I heard nothing new, so you admitted this was all started before. Every one of those things was already in progress. So you inherited a very good team that's carried it on. And I must say, the Transformation Board was not set up to sort out problems with IT. The Transformation Board, originally undertitled Digital Transformation, was set up to improve the efficiency of the council. And I think it was outstandingly successful in that by removing £12 million. And I am extremely disappointed that you can't give an estimate of how much that journey will continue to be added onto that 12 million in the next 12 months. Because that was the whole object of the business change team, which I've got to, as Paul is here, I've got to say the business change team have done a brilliant job, as done the digital team, and I must not forget all the people in IT that provide all the technology behind it. So, as far as I can see, Councillor Osborne, there is no change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goldman. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
Okay, well, look, I mean, I respect this is a Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's not, I mean, I'm really disappointed you can't see that change. You're sitting in a meeting right now where we're discussing digital issues in a renamed committee. So you're literally living and breathing that change. But aside from that point, I have given you a figure that we were considering, and that was the £4 million figure. That will, of course, be made through removing redundancy legacy databases, and through that removal of cost from effectively procuring those databases, we will return that cost. However, I can't give you, and no one would be realistically expected to tell you what will be happening with next year's budget. That is for the budget process to come through, and he has been through a number of these budget iterations and will know that. As for the previous, as for nothing new, well, of course, I will be fair to members on that side. A lot of legacy IT system, well, a lot of the legacy IT projects, the movement towards Microsoft, was something that was delivered under the previous administration. I'm not here to make a party political jibe about that. I celebrate the fact that we moved to that database, and we actually are going to be working and building on that legacy. But my point is that there's an emphasis shift here, whereby I consider digital to be absolutely key to the future of where this council is. It is going to be a focus for me to make sure that we improve that accessibility across all our platforms, websites, through the use of online reporting to improve that narrative, to ensure that our residents are getting a changed customer service approach, and actually to seize transformation in some of our working culture, as well as our customer relationship. And for me, that's really important. I'm afraid if you can't see some of those changes, that's perfectly, you're entitled to that view. But I personally believe that actually that agenda now is very much centre stage, which is partly the reason why I'm sat in front of you this evening, which is a key element of ensuring that you hold that process to account in a much more robust manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne, for your response. Councillor Hubbard.
Thank you. Tris, welcome. It's nice to see you in this position. Right, so you're 6 months in, and you've inherited something. And I suppose I'm trying to find out, what is the most pressing issue that you feel that's in your portfolio that needs to be addressed? And then sort of widen it out. What's the most pressing issue that you, as part of the Cabinet, are pressing forward with 6 months in?
Thank you, Councillor Hubbard. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
So within the purview of the responsibilities for this committee, of course, so the most important element that I'm having to deal with is, funnily enough, is not funny, it's actually to grapple with the budget. So I know we were talking about figures earlier, but the legacy of what was £17 million deficit in the first quarter, now having been reduced to management action to 12 million, there's difficult decisions that have had to be made. And I know we were discussing this in a previous item around some of the difficulties around those decisions. They're hard, okay, and they're being made in a hard-nosed way. I can tell you that is, it's not giving me sleepless nights, but certainly these are difficult decisions. So budget matters are very much my focus, which is actually the reason why Paul and Phil are doing some excellent work on IT transformation, because with this project, with this programme, we can reduce costs and make savings and improve the customer interface with us. And that's partly the reason why we're doing it, because we have at the moment around 42 legacy systems across the council in various guises, and yet with the Microsoft suite, which our predecessors signed up to, I've been candid about that, we can actually move to a single approach with one provider, which will see us reduce all of those procurement costs. So I'm very, very keen to see all those costs stripped out. And then I'm also keen, as a result of that, to improve the customer engagement with the council, to improve our social media engagement, to digitalise, to use videos, to modernise our approach to communications, and also to ensure that our residents can access when they need us. They don't have to be effectively filling in clunky forms every 5 seconds to register an issue like a pothole or a fly tip, that they can do so quickly, remotely, on their phones, and they can get a customer service response which is scalable and which they can scrutinise and which they know where they are in the system. They're not lost in what I refer to as a black hole of communications where they don't feel they're getting a response. So, and I'm hopeful after my desire after, and I've made it very clear to my team, after a 3 to 4 year period with me in this position, I would want to see that web improvement happen, that report it, that deliver it, that needs to be a key part of the delivery outcome. And we need to be getting customer service response which is positive, that people feel that the council is more responsive to their needs. And that's really what I want to see. And we can do that at a time, of course, we are getting less money from central government and other things. So we can improve things by doing things differently. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Would you like to come back in?
Yeah, so one thing that has changed actually in the last year, I remember listening to a BBC interviewer, actually having an AI write an introduction to his item on AI. So one thing that's happened in the last year is AI has taken off in a big way and is going somewhere very rapidly. So how has that impacted upon Medway 2.0? Because it must be of use and help.
Yeah, so I can certainly answer some of that, and then I think, Paul, you probably can talk about how AI is being embedded in a number of other platforms. So I know members, I directed some of the, Paul and his team, I think they've spoken to both groups about Medway 2.0. They visited your groups and had a conversation with you about that. So AI, there's definitely, we're looking to embed that into our council structures. Of course, that is within the guidance that is provided by government, because AI is a managed space, and we need to ensure that we're using platforms and systems which are fully compliant with local government. But there are elements of AI. So first of all, in regards to vehicles that people might feel are illegally parked, or vehicles that haven't been taxed. So the system that we will be introducing will automatically link in through an AI platform with the DVLA database, and we'll be able to give an immediate response to residents on that. In addition, customer services, I think many of us with banks and other commercial enterprises can access, for instance, if you want to find out a time for something, you can write a message or chat to someone remotely, and a bot, in a sense, will give you a response to that question. And that's something we can certainly explore. I can say the science behind this needs to update slightly, because I think when I last used it about 8 months ago or something, it did come up with some names which were historical. But these are all learning points as well on AI. And I think there's other elements as well. I don't, Paul, if you wanted to expand on where AI might be of use to us in the future.
So within the Medway 2.0 pilot, with the report in a vehicle, the artificial intelligence is actually scanning the photo. So if a customer uploads a photo, it will actually look at that photo, recognise it's a vehicle, recognise the number plate, and extract the number plate. So the resident could take a picture, upload, it knows the number plate, it can do the DVLA checks, all automated, and give that response back to the customer without an officer getting involved. So that's the current use of artificial intelligence. The next stage is the generative AI, the chat GPT that's very popular in the press. Microsoft have just launched their Copilot. It's still very early days, but we've covered it in our digital data and technology strategy that at the moment any generative AI must be checked by a human. So any use of that, we're not going wild with it at the moment. It has to be checked by a human. But the opportunities for generative chatbots, natural language, interacting with the council for giving advice on things, using our own data is really exciting, and I see that as the next iteration of our development.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Councillor Osborne, for your response. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I'm sure that Paul will not be surprised that I'm very disappointed with this report in the fact that they've only got 3 elements in the pilot. You know, when I was working with Paul on this, we had at least 11 that were going to go into that pilot, and now we're down to 3. I hope that they're in 1 application and not 3 applications that they are at the moment. And I hope that the brief that Paul was given, certainly for myself, was that we wanted this to be, you know, fix my street or better. And I hope that it is better than fix my street. So the question really is, when will we see, I mean, Fix My Street has something like 20 elements that you can report in it, from graffiti to fly tipping to litter, all sorts of other things. So when will we get those 20 different elements of being able to report it? Because that's important. The speed of delivery is very important. 7 months later, just to have a pilot and only 3 is very, very disappointing. So that's my first point. My second point is, I wonder why you're not continuing with the member user group, which was a cross-party group that discussed these sorts of things before they actually got released. We had our last meeting in April. Councillor Maple said at that time, I hope that whoever the administration are, they continue with this meeting on a monthly basis, because he found it very useful being cross-party. So I wonder why you've cancelled that or haven't had the reason to put that back in. And on a personal note, the council tax thing that you mentioned, I think it's more difficult to get into the council tax system than it is to get into my own bank. We have, you know, we've applied this 12-digit password that has to be renewed every 90 days. Can't be the same as the last one. There's, if you go forward and there's sometimes in the system there's no way of getting back without actually exiting the whole system. So it's not perfect. when the public are engaged in signing something on, it needs to be quick and easy and memorable. They want to put a password in like their dead pet +1 or something. You know, so I think you've made it too complicated. You've applied the password element of it is just too difficult for most of the general public. If we were to encourage the rest of the sort of 95,000 households we've got to use that system, we've got to make it as simple as possible and as accessible as possible, and it isn't. So can we take some commitment that you'll look at that and go back and find out how we can make it easier for the general public to log on to the council tax? Because I'm wholeheartedly behind it. If we can get rid of the paper, it will be brilliant. Let everybody go on and view their things, but we must make it simple and usable for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so on the third point, absolutely happy to take that away. Obviously, with any database system nowadays, there is increasing complexity around security. I know, for instance, for many websites, if you're logging onto your personal email account now, you need to have sometimes even texting you numbers to access those services. So we live in that world, I'm afraid, where phishing and other types of exploitation occur online. So with any system which involves people's money or finances, we will use the highest level of security we can to prevent inappropriate access. If that is causing issues, however, we can certainly take a look at that and see if we can improve that process for you and your residents. And I'm happy to say, however, that the take-up on that My Council Tax has been quite good. So it could always improve. And I think a lot of people pay council tax, as I say, once a year, they pay it annually, so therefore they probably don't need to sign up to it because they do it that way. But any process that we can improve online is something we'd be willing to take on board. In regards to your question on the Transformation Board, of course, we're now discussing it here. So that's the reason why. Previously, this committee didn't discuss or didn't have a firm item on Medway 2.0. We've taken that decision to bring it to a cross-party forum like this, of course, which is scrutinised by the public online and camera, and of course where members of the public can also sit in the audience and watch that. So we've taken it away from a task group which perhaps, it was cross-party, but it wasn't public in the same way that a scrutiny meeting is like this. And in my view, this is where it's the most appropriate forum for this sort of discussion to have, because it is fully transparent on an issue which is very important in the future. Now, that isn't to say that if you feel that, that you would like other forums or subgroups of this august body to meet to discuss specific IT issues, that couldn't be looked at by the chair with consideration by all members here. And I'd be happy to work and partner with all groups on this body to do such a thing. But I felt personally that this was the most appropriate place to discuss these sorts of issues, given the scale of transformation, given the importance we place on IT in this administration. And that's partly the reason why this committee is renamed, and I'm sat here being held to account on it, and I think that that's really important as well. So that's the decision that was made, rightly or wrongly. I accept that you don't think that was right, and I accept that that's your position. So on the scale of the project, it's not about the number of things you're delivering, it's delivering what you're doing correctly, in my view. So, I could have said deliver 20 things by Christmas. Is that rational with the team we have? Is it rational with the relationship we have with Microsoft? Because obviously we're working and partnering with them. Is that something they can deliver on? Is that something we can work with? Is it something we have with our team? Because we'll have to engage internally with multiple departments. And ultimately, my key delivery agenda for this is to get it right. Okay, I don't want to rush something out with IT, because inevitably there will be bugs and there will be faults if you rush something. So I've said to my team, what I want is a product which is good quality, that people can access and that the public can access, and that and that is what they've been tasked to do. So yes, you might say the pilot could include multiple other aspects, and I'm very keen to expand on this, as are you, clearly, to build on this, and that's something that we'll be keen to do. But I don't want to rush lots of different things out unless it's been beta tested, unless the departments are happy, unless the management within the organisation are working with us and we're exactly in the right place to deliver that. So that's the reason why we are doing the approach we're doing, and I'm comfortable with that. And subject to next year's, obviously, with the budget rounds that we're seeing, I would, depending on that situation, we will look at an expansion of this into different areas, and that's indicated on the report. Just lastly on transparency and staff, So obviously we are working very closely with partners in Microsoft. Okay, so, and this is not only a front office in terms of what is happening for the public, but also all of the back office elements as well. So, and we're looking to make systems or take systems away. So what you don't want to do is build something into a platform for the public that has a back office which effectively you're about to upgrade. So what we want to do is ensure that the program that we're doing is upgrading both at the same time over a period. So, so I will take advice from professionals around the time frames that they wish to deliver it on. I'm not a program IT manager, and I admit that to the public. That's not my job, okay, but I will listen to experts who are, and I think that's only a fair way. And I will say that absolutely, and I'll say this again, there is a legacy here from the previous administration. You moved to Microsoft, that was a good move, okay, and that's the reason why we're working. The delivery of this project would have happened, I suspect, in some form or another, whatever the colour of the administration. The point is here is the emphasis. I am absolutely crystal clear that this needs to be at this body, public scrutiny, it needs to be held to account, and there needs to be a robust back and forth if services on IT are not where we want them to be. And that's partly the reason why I'm sat here now. I hope that answers your questions. I'm very happy to follow up.
Just to come back, on the member user group issue, it wasn't a forum like this. It was more a hands-on demonstration. This is what we're thinking of doing. Can you add some, a cross-party member group to actually say, can you add some benefit to this system before we press the button and go live? So it's a completely different forum than discussing something in overview and scrutiny. So it's not the same at all. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I will take that on board. And clearly, if there is an agreement to go back to that style of approach, then I'm sure on a cross-party basis we can look at that, absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Crozer. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Osborne, for your report. Can I take you away just quickly from the digital platform, much as I'm in favour of it, to item 4.38, the 4 Elms Hill air quality. I don't know what IoT is, but the IoT sensory network. I know you've got, or we've been given £270,000 to start that project, but it's reliant on match funding from Frontline Services. Is that going to take place anytime soon, or is Frontline Services strapped for the cash?
Thank you, Councillor Crozer. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
Yes, so absolutely. So thank you very much for your question. And as indicated on there, if it's in this year's budget, which it is, we will absolutely utilise that. Clearly, the council at the moment, as you will be aware, and I'm happy to remind you again, in quarter one we had a £17 million deficit. We now have a £12 million deficit. Clearly, financial decisions need to be made over the coming months around how we reduce that deficit further. So it's mentioned in this report, and I'm very keen, because air pollution is something which is a significant concern to me, to see that where we have match funding, that we do deliver on that. So, I'm happy to chase on your behalf to ensure that that occurs.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much indeed, again, Chair. And I'd like to say through you, Chair, to Councillor Osborne, I see the enthusiasm coming out in this report, and you've clearly been, if I may say, through the Chair, taking a balanced view between hands-on involvement and the strategic. And clearly you're very much enmeshed in the IT development through the Chair. It is that which I wanted to ask about, and perhaps more at the strategic level. We've heard already at this meeting today about the close working that's going on between DWP and our benefits people at the Council, and you yourself, Councillor Osborne, have mentioned the work with DVLA, which is ongoing. When we are developing our systems as a matter of principle, how far are we taking account of the need for information exchange with our key partners? By this I mean the police, fire and rescue, the NHS. it seems to me there's an issue that within the NHS, systems aren't always compatible between hospital and GPs, but that's probably outside the remit of this committee to give but one example. But have you anything perhaps to say on the general principles of, and perhaps some anecdotes from your work as portfolio holder, the general principles of developing systems to improve communications with other public sector bodies which have very much developed their own IT systems?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, thank you very much. So I think members will be aware, perhaps they weren't, in September 2018, legislation did come into force which requires public sector organisations to make sure all new websites, data, digital documents and others are all effectively worked within a framework that the government sets. So within the government, there's a standard process by which we share data with them. Now that depends on the system, you are correct, that the government are using. But actually, the systems that we're using, Microsoft is a recognised provider of government websites and other databases and systems. So we're confident that the Microsoft will be able to link in with all of these other platforms in a coherent way. And in fact, I think that's partly the reason why the previous administration and us signed up to them in the first place, because they will do that. In addition to that, there is, in October 2022, there's a minimum standard around web content accessibility as well, and we're absolutely committed to ensuring that we're not only hitting that minimum standard, but we're best practice in terms of our engagement with residents and also with other bodies such as charities and third sectors as well. So these aren't just organisations which have a direct contact with us from a data perspective, but also those who are looking to access information. So, and I'll give you an example there, that our Report It app will actually link in with Fix My Street, for instance. So if you report on Fix My Street, that report will auto-generate in our system, it'll auto-link, and that will generate then an item internally within our organisation. So we're going to be working with other platforms as well, and linking with those in a more consistent way than we have done previously. And I think members will be aware, I know the late Councillor Mike O'Brien spoke very highly about the Love Medway app, and that's something I remember very well. And it was one of those apps which was before its time, I think, in terms of its scope. And I've been very keen to ensure that that sort of approach where the public do have access and the systems do communicate with each other effectively is effective, but also up to the higher standards and fully compliant with all government rules.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to come to you. Obviously, we've got to look to the future, and you working in schools, you're probably well aware as any parents around that nowadays our kids are on their phones, what seems like 24/7, and the schools have embraced that technology and moving forward. So having a digital Medway 2.0 will ensure that we continue for the future, so and move forward. And it's really, really good to be seeing that and the work and the passion you've got for it. Probably the right person to move on to this. Just going through, we've also got to remember we've got some older people in our area we're also responsible for, and they don't actually grab this a lot more. But under 4.9, the digital transformation with council tax online, I'm fully aware that we offer free swimming to our children, and also to our more older residents, our senior residents, and part of that is that they require to bring a council tax into the sports centres to show that they're eligible to apply for that free placing. So are we looking to make sure that we've got a digital version of doing that, so they don't have to physically bring something in? On another point, you keep mentioning about engaging in transparency with residents, which is really, really good, but are we using that? So 3.8, we've got unauthorised encampments, and there's probably been a lot of to and fro about what was an authorised encampment is now an unauthorised encampment, but are we engaging and being transparent with the residents about these, what's happening and how long it takes? It's not that people are not wanting to get things done, but the legal requirements and a lot of these unauthorised encampments, they know the law as well as we do, and they know how long it's going to take to deal with that. But can we make sure that we're using our digital platforms to make sure that people are engaged? I looked on the website usage, and a lot of the things on that top 5 list, I think most of us in here, so using the Medway Council to book the household waste sites is really, really good. Recently done the school places, couldn't have been any easier, and it shows you what's happening. Do like the use of technology, so in regards to the road temperatures. So yes, we do need to grit the roads, but gritting also has with rock salt has a damage to the environment, especially if it gets into waterways for frogs and toads, also to the plants along the side verges. So being able to decide that we don't need to grit this road because it's not going to drop, not only does it reduce the cost of getting the vehicles out and also of the rock salt, and if the forecasts are anything to go by, we're going to have more snow. Rock salt prices will start rising as the demand goes down. So if we're not having to use it, it's great, it's reducing costs. And also with regards to the air quality. So the 4 realms, yes, I think that's brilliant. Just going on to a different subject, we've recently looked at red routes, and one of them is like cutting congestion, improving air quality. So I just wondered if we've used something like that to formulate our reasoning behind of what's the air quality and what we're looking to use to reduce the level of pollutants in the air, and are we engaging that and being transparent with the residents with regards to that data? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joy. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much there. I think you're almost evangelical, actually, about the digital agenda, which perhaps I should consider you for a similar august position as my opposition, so because it's very fantastic to hear, actually. You talk, and absolutely you are correct around the change in the education space around digital. I know from a first-hand perspective that is the case. So let me take your questions in part. So first of all, around the digital divide. I actually did mention this right at the start. This is not something which is going to be phased in at the expense of other services, in the sense that we want to just cut and remove other services as a result. But what we would want to see is a reduction in use, because people would be able to access digital services as an alternative to perhaps picking up the phone or having to go onto a different platform to have to report it. And that ultimately will drive a reduction in customer service going through our telephony service and actually reduce cost. So we get a benefit from that from a customer perspective, because they are accessing our services in a different way, and also from an operational perspective as well. So that doesn't mean we're going to stop certain services for people who are not digitally as engaged as others. And I have been really clear about that actually we do need to maintain, for residents who are not IT literate or indeed have access to the internet, that we need to maintain our footprint in the non-digital world as well, because a large number of our residents, including some of our most vulnerable residents, of course, will still be accessing and using it through that medium, and they'll still want to go to somewhere and meet someone and go through that process. And of course they might need support as well, especially with a certain number of complex forms, which might not always be the easiest online at present, and even with an updated database with the requirements that are needed, they might still need to be in person. Okay, so this isn't this is an alternative for some services. It's not going to replace or scrap services for, in my view, a very long time because of the digital divides that we have. So you mentioned about the environmental network and how that links in with roads. Of course, this is happening countrywide at the moment. So a lot of the new air quality monitors are Wi-Fi accessible, similar to actually our CCTV network now, which has moved on to is moved away from the fibre optic approach, very expensive cameras, to a more digital cloud-based approach where they sync much more readily, and that's reduced cost in CCTV, for instance. And I think that approach where we're using those digital systems is only going to expand, and actually the use of our waste carrier fleet, for instance, to monitor the road network is another innovation which happened in the last couple of years, and that's something which has been able to give us a lot more granular information. And so I would absolutely hope that you know, we would have air quality sensors that could link into our not only government ones, but link into our council as well, if we wanted to look at particular streets and roads. I will just reiterate that's not the reason why we're doing the red routes, however. So that is about congestion and reducing transport congestion and allowing bus access and flow. So air quality is a tangential aspect of red routes. So on the third point around just looking at the connectivity and the customer support element. So one of the things I want to see actually is, and one thing we haven't done as well in customer services of late, so some people feel that when they report something to the council, it gets lost in this sort of what I call the sort of black hole of communications. And that's partly as a result of some of our databases not speaking to each other. So I'm going to give you an example of that. So we have a database that deals with, say, a pothole that needs to be replaced. So you may contact a customer services operative. Okay, that customer services operative will log the pothole, and then that will get logged on, and then someone else will log it onto a different system. But then when the person chases that pothole to see why it hasn't been repaired, that will actually create another customer services report. It won't log the previous one because the previous one hasn't been answered, or the customer services representative doesn't have access to the database to get the information. So we're creating this sort of it's a system which effectively is clogged up, and the public doesn't feel like they're getting effective redress. Now, that isn't to say that eventually the public aren't getting answered to, but actually some of our public service customer services people are getting quite frustrated with that. So what we hope to do with this is have a streamlined, using Microsoft as the platform, that they'll be able to readily access where any complaint is at any one moment in time and be able to inform the resident of that. And we'll have we're looking at the ways we can do that via emails to auto-update people when it goes to a certain process. Also, if it's reached a certain stage. So that customer interface, I mean, perhaps, Paul, you can go into more detail on that, but that's something which is a back office change, but actually will, I think, fundamentally change the dynamic with the resident to them feeling like they are getting a good service. And that isn't to say that we're not brilliant at many things, but actually I think our customer services communications internally and also externally has been quite a weakness of ours, and an area which I think we could improve, and that's something which we're going to push on. I don't know, Paul, if you wanted to come back on that point to the councillor.
Yeah, if I may. So especially, it's not just about implementing some new technology. We're having to redesign the whole service, which is why 7 months to implement something that goes from the start to the finish within one system, avoiding talking to lots of different systems. It's that effort and that work to redesign services that's worth taking that time. Once it's built, it'll be a copy and paste to report a pothole, a copy and paste to report something else. Then in parallel, we can work on applying for it, paying for it. And you're right, I think we had about 9 that we could distill the thousands of council services down into around 9 core components that we could reuse, but we want to get them right first within a single system where possible.
Thank you. Yes, you can come back.
All I was saying is with engagement and doing it through the website, if you like, say we have a power cut, we've had a few recently across Medway, and you go online to the power network and you put in to report a power cut, it automatically, once you put a particular area, it comes up and goes, we're aware of this, it's been reported out, we're looking to have it on and back on the system, and we'll have an update by. And it just tells that person straight away, so, oh yeah, they're already aware of it, they're working with it. It just makes us look a little bit more professional. And as I said, if somebody's reporting an abandoned vehicle, and it's on, say, pick at any road, just go James Road, and you put in James Road reporting an abandoned vehicle, and it'll already come up this, we are actually in the process of dealing with that, and that's then engaging and being transparent with people, and instead of them going, well, typical council, don't know what we're doing, it's it's probably where you said about your AI, and maybe we can, if we can speak to some of these other organisations, how do they get that information? They're literally a click of a button and you've got a response back saying, we're aware of this, we are working on it, and we hope to have we hope to have an update, or it dealt with by X, and then it just lets people, and it, like you said, it reduces people phoning up and asking more questions.
So coincidentally, that exact example is why we've taken another month to implement what we were doing, because the current system, out of the box, forces the customer to report where it is, what it is, who they are, their details, the registration number, and then at the very end of the process, it says, oh, we already know about this, do you want to be tagged onto it? The current processes don't even give you that option, it creates a duplicate case. So we're redesigning the system to be at the very front. I want to report a car, it's here. Is it this one? Oh, yeah. And they may not even want to report it, or if they do want to report it, they can become a linked case where they will get the automated updates to be informed without creating another case within the system. So it's exactly that example that we're working on.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Councillor Osborne, for your answer. Councillor Cook, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to...
Sorry, Councillor Galvin, it was Councillor Cook.
Oh, sorry.
I've got the same problem. Right. Thank you very much. I'll be shorter than I was going to be because it ties in with both previous questions. So firstly, absolutely agree. I think what I can really see in here is things that affect people's everyday lives and that real impact on things that really bother residents. And I really appreciate that. My questions were around the digital divide, which you've just answered, so I won't go back over that. But to come back to Councillor Jones's question around the reporting and working with wider agency, and really curious to know about how this technology might evolve in working with wider organisations, thinking about other areas of your portfolio, for example, the police, antisocial behaviour, use of green spaces, that kind of area that we've spoken about often. I'm wondering how we could use this reporting technology to look at, for example, particular areas within Medway that might need a focus, whether we'd be able to work more strategically with partners such as the police to look at crimes that are being reported and then instances of graffiti, of antisocial behaviour that the council can respond to, and where this might go in helping us to tackle some of those thorny issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, so I might give you an example of that, and then I'll pass on, I think, to Paul, who might be able to give you some more granular examples, I suspect, that might be. So the movement from effectively 42 legacy platforms to a Microsoft system approach means that you create a data pool. I think someone calls it a data lake, I think, in the vernacular. So basically all the data is accumulated in one place. Now, I would love to share data with other organisations. We have to be very careful that they subscribe fully to a series of codes before we do that. Because obviously, people giving you data, as we all know in here, people giving you data for one thing, sharing it with others for another purpose has to be disclosed to them because they're only giving it to you on that basis. So we would, of course, have to follow all guidelines and guidance. And whilst you're absolutely correct, sharing information with the police around particular reports of antisocial behaviour, we would have to make sure we get legal advice before they could readily access some of that data, if that makes sense. So one of the things I would need, I can't give you a firm commitment. I think absolutely it's common sense that you would do this, that you would give data to the NHS, you'd provide data to the police on antisocial behaviour and other things. And we do, I'm sure we share information and they share information with us, but there are operational limitations due to the way that we've accumulated that data and the way that data might be used. So I'm just going to caveat that right now and say, within the rules that are acceptable by government, because data at the moment is a very, if we get that wrong, the potential fines are significant. You're talking percentage of turnover of an organisation, and many private sector organisations are actually taking data very seriously on that basis at the moment because of the potential revenue fines, even with the removal from the European data protection sort of legislation. We've actually adopted something very similar in the UK with the UK data protection as well. So organisations are very mindful of that, but I didn't know if you wanted to give some examples of where perhaps we can work across agency and where data is being shared and pooled.
It was specifically on the example of graffiti, so the AI can be used to recognise tags, so if it's the same tag occurring and where it's occurring and when, and also recognise the language that's being used within the graffiti that helps prioritise fixing it and picking up certain words or themes. So that's some of the examples that we're exploring.
Thank you. Thanks for your question, Hans. I've got three more members. I've got Councillor Lawrence, then Councillor Brown, and then Councillor Galvin. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It was an interesting read, and you know, as members know, I'm really in favour of the Medway 2.0 because I think it's got the power to be totally transformational. I think, as a general comment, we shouldn't be scared to move more into digital because this is going to take years to deliver. In actual fact, most of us are doing most things online now, whether it's ordering from Amazon or we're doing our banking or we're doing finance or we're buying insurance, whatever it is. So I don't think we should be held back because we're worried about vulnerable groups, but I think we can make we can make our services digital as well as supporting vulnerable groups. In terms of what we might think about as deprivation, if you go into any school in Medway, 95% of the kids will have smartphones. Deprivation is not necessarily a barrier to accessing digital services, but I think this is really important. These services are going to take 5 to 10 years to deliver. The council is so far behind the commercial world in some of this stuff that actually by the time we deliver these services, you know, the commercial world is going to have moved on enormously. I'm going to do something really dangerous given the fact these two gentlemen sitting beside me is I'm going to be critical of the previous administration. We invested a lot of money in infrastructure. We didn't invest enough money in application build. So Councillor Osborne talks a lot about Microsoft. Well, Microsoft is just a framework. It's not actually the solution. So Microsoft 365, which is we're all using for email, Excel and Word, is not the solution to the council's problems. Okay, it just means that data can be managed. We've got up-to-date applications that we don't have to send a disk round to be updated on every laptop. In terms of AI, I'm undertaking an AI project in my own business, and I have to tell you, it's a massive amount of work. AI is not a solution because the AI is only as good as the data you put into it. So we need to be really clear that, yes, Microsoft has built a lot of AI into its Office products. And, you know, we're all getting these reminders. Did you remember to respond to? And that's a bit of where the AI is coming. I wonder whether you would commit to coming up with a strategic plan with some key KPIs and deliverables in it so that this committee can hold you to account for that plan. Because I think that's the bit that's missing. I'm hearing an awful lot of buzzwords, but I'm not actually hearing a lot about ambition, doing things, you know, what the vision is. Yeah, we're all talking about digital, but you've not really given us a vision for what for what Medway 2.0 will achieve. I'd like to know what the longer term savings are. For example, you log on to, you deal with any commercial business, actually a lot of public businesses, you can do lots of stuff after hours. In Medway, you can't. When the telephone's closed, basically, there's a lot of stuff that you can't do. So I'd really like you to consider, and I'd like it to make it a proposal from this report that you come back with a strategic document that sets out what you're going to deliver before you leave power in 2027, and that we can then hold you accountable for the delivery of that plan. And I think you should be really bullish with the investment that's going to be needed to deliver that plan. So that was a point. I wonder whether you are advocating in Cabinet for more spend in the digital space, because if you're not, then that's a strategic mistake. I'm wondering where you, I mean, some of the services we're doing online, you know, most 18-year-olds could knock up the website in a long weekend. So I'm quite disappointed in some of the things that we've got in here, like reporting abandoned vehicles. I mean, I could open my laptop and show you an API that talks to DVLA, and I'll tell anyone in the room whether your car's taxed or not. These things aren't particularly difficult to do. So I think the other challenge back to you is that if Medway 2.0 is as important as you say it is, that this committee on this side, we wanted Medway 2.0 to be the first of the focus groups, but the Labour group are more, and it's a political priority, are interested in air quality, but we already know the result of the air quality focus group, that the air's not very clean, but there's bugger all we can do about it. So I hope some of those comments are useful. I'm 100% supportive of the digitisation process, but we need more investment, we need more ambition, and I'd like to see a strategic plan that we can actually hold you accountable for.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so I think a number of those comments are quite fair, actually. First of all, I'm sure your colleagues won't be somewhat embarrassed by you saying that the previous administration didn't get everything right. Of course, I'm regularly saying that, so I'm glad that we both agree on that point. But no, actually, and I started this by saying they did get some things right. So actually, there's a bit of consensus there, and you're correct. Absolutely, Microsoft is not the sort of the golden ticket. It's not the golden goose. It is merely the consolidation of databases into one, which will then realise some of these improvements and also cost savings as well within the organisation, because we won't have to effectively procure all of these different databases, some of whom don't talk to each other a lot. As well. So, I will caveat it slightly. I don't think, whilst, I used to put websites together many years ago, 20 years ago, ex-HTML, I used to design them myself to take a bit longer than a night, and they weren't very good. So the point here is that we have standards that we do have to maintain, and the government sets the standards, and accessibility as well is important too. For a lot of people with digital needs are varied, and we have to ensure we have access. So I'm not a specialist in this space by any stretch of imagination. That's not my career, but I work with teams of people that are, okay, and I can tell you that they do work as quickly as they can, and with all the stakeholders they need to ensure that the product that is coming through is positive. Now, could we go quicker? That's my job to push the case, and eyebrows are getting raised here, because believe you me, I have been quite pushy with dates and things in the past. But actually, what I've been quite keen on is to make sure that we get it right, rather than rush something out. So, and I think from an organisational, reputational perspective as well, you all know this, if you get web things wrong, you end up getting in the press for all the wrong reasons. People can then, if you get email systems incorrect, there's all sorts of fines as well, potential for data issues as well. We absolutely can't get this wrong because of the liability that has an organisational reputation, but also as a potential budgetary issue too. In terms of the advocacy that I'm giving in Cabinet at the moment, obviously I mentioned to Councillor Hubbard, budgetary issues are a major concern of all the Cabinet members at the moment. We have a legacy liability, but actually, what this programme actually does, it's not a cost. And I'm trying to reiterate this. This can realise savings, because through the digital agenda, you can improve customer service and you can strip out costs that would otherwise be used with that customer service that you're taking away. So actually, this should be realising savings, because we're reducing procurement, we're reducing the potential use of telephony services because people can access services in a different way, okay, and you're improving customer service interface as well, so that therefore your organisational and operational reputation improves too. So there's a win through every aspect of this. So you're absolutely right. We do need, and I'm making the case at the moment with members around next year's budget to ensure that this is a key part of that agenda. And the fact that it's at this august committee now, the fact that I've pushed this up the agenda now to a point where it's much more in the public realm for debate, means I'm passionate, and I firmly believe it will be in that agenda going forward. And I know that I'm working with Paul and others, that actually they are feeling like the organisation at the moment is really paying attention to this. Certainly from a political perspective, both opposition and the main group are really keen on that, and I hope that's communicated more widely through Phil and and the other teams in the council that this has to be delivered. On your question on the commitment to a strategic plan, I think that's I think it's a sensible idea. I'm happy to take that forward. I think we do need to have a clearer document setting where we perhaps visually see ourselves in 4 years' time. In fact, maybe linking to the report and other types of functions. So you can actually see maybe a visual representation of how that works. And also you get a visual representation of some of the databases that we're removing and some of the timeframes behind that. So I appreciate Paul is a busy man and that team is overworked. And so I can see Phil was like giving me eyebrows and things like that because that's even more work for his team. But I actually probably think that having that policy and that programme to present to you, I think would be a sensible idea, and then you can contribute from your expert perspective. And just lastly, I couldn't agree more. We are 10 years behind. I mean, I said this when I sat in the job. I said I get my food online now, not all of it, but I order online. I can access my bank online. I can go online and see television. I can go online and get the latest news. I've got social media. I can do Facebook. I can go and order a taxi if needed through our Medway taxi organisation. I mean, we can do multiple different things online, and yet our council services and local government appears to be not particularly responsive. And I have to say UK government as well, if you take it even more broadly. I think some of their websites could be updated to be more user-friendly. Though, that being said, that's a programme of work that they're going to have to take on as well, and we can always improve as well. So I think all of the public realm has lessons to learn from the private sector on this. I don't think any public sector provision is as good as some of the private sector provisions at the moment in terms of their technological innovation. And that's partly because the private sector, of course, does pay significant sums for what is a commodity, which is specialist programmers and designers and developers, which the public sector just doesn't have that ability. So, look, I think having that programme will be sensible, and I think we can commit to looking at putting that to this committee. I know you want a more firm commitment on that on dates. I can't give you that because I've just told you I'd be interested in doing it. So, and I think you absolutely need to hold me to account on that if it doesn't come forward. Is that a sensible answer, or do you want to come back on that point?
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Osborne. I think, look, it's going to take you time to pull together a plan. So I think we've got a meeting in February. Maybe one in March, but certainly by the end of the civic year we should, because I understand that you guys have got lots of your own things you need to achieve. So certainly by the start of the next civic year we should have a strong plan that we can hold you accountable for. In terms of accessibility, actually the UK government's websites are some of the most accessible in the world. The UK government, anyone who's renewed a passport online recently, for example, it's an amazing system. We don't need to recreate that wheel. All we've got to do is copy that pattern. It's called a pattern. Copy that pattern and our websites will be really accessible. Thank you for your openness. I think look forward to dragging you back at some point in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would you like to respond, Councillor Lawrence?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to be dragged back as many times as you feel necessary in some cases. So, look, I'll give you. I can't. I'll take advice from officers on their timeframes. I think that's sensible because they're the guys who are ultimately delivering that. I can commit. As soon as we can get that together, we'll get that to you. I'm not going to say it's going to be early in the next year because I think that would be that's me putting words in other people's mouths. But what I will do is this. You're absolutely correct. We do need to have a document which sets the direction of travel, and I think that is a sensible suggestion. I think it's a rational one, and I will take that forward. On IT accessibility, I will say that in my view, the private sector is ahead of the public sector in many areas of their web accessibility and some of the apps that they're using, and there are lessons that, and in fact in some areas the public sector is ahead, but actually I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from best practice and that's partly the reason why we're actually in partnership with Microsoft, because Microsoft are a world leader in, I mean we all know who they are, but they are in this sort of space working with local government. They have a strong track record, and us working with those programmers who link in with other public sector bodies, I think using their expertise is something which we absolutely need because we don't really have that internally. So, I'm comfortable that we are utilising that, and absolutely will ensure that accessibility is a focus for us. So I thank you for your remarks this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. I've got Councillor Brown and then Councillor Golvin. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I was going to defer to Councillor Golvin first in case because he'd been in before, he might want to have clarified something. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Goulven. Sorry, guys, bit of a history lesson. The reason I'm here in Medway is because I was the first head of customer relations, and I was brought here to improve the customer experience. And at the time, we worked with Deloitte. We spent a lot of money on clunky systems. They turned out to be clunky now, but they were better than the scraps of paper that they replaced. And the one other thing that we did at that time, and I'm quite proud of it, is that we standardized quite a lot of our interactions so that people got accurate advice and they got accurate timescales. Like when people were saying things like, when do I leave out my rubbish? Some people were saying about 7 o'clock. Some people were saying in the early morning, depending on who they spoke to. So we standardized a lot of that. And that's why maybe we got some of the clunky forms, because the technology was, at that time, more around bespoke things. But the big frustrations for the service, and they still are, because the service took on the frustrations of the public. And it was about visibility of re-reported stuff, finding out how long an action will take. And the reason I mention this is, and I'm actually quite pleased to see that Paul and the team have taken 3 service areas and to try and get actually the customer flow correct and use that to fulfill the transaction. Digital telephones, pieces of paper, smoke and mirrors, whatever you like, they're only a contact method. What the customer is interested in, and our residents are interested in, is the resolution to the issue that they've got. And what I would implore is that we do stick with the idea that this is an end-to-end change, and I would countenance against rushing stuff unless you can get the reporting back right, the timing right, and the accessibility will come. I agree with Councillor Joy that people will find it easier to use if the front end is friendly, if it is intuitive, and I'm sure that all of those things are possible because, like Councillor Lawrence says, there is a certain amount of replication that we can make. We just have to brand it. But what I'm asking for, and I know it is digital, and it's going to be delivered through digital, but get the business process behind it correct. It's very easy for a business who has one stovepipe to deliver. They're either selling something or buying something or making something. We're doing lots of different stovepipes, and some of them have legal implications. Some of them are just a service delivery vehicle and we're just the front end. But we have to then hold our contractors to account. So we need things like, how long is a transaction going to take? And it's a bit like when we standardized the phrase, put it out on your curtilage by 7 a.m. And that's what we told people who were unsure, and those are the words that we used. And everybody used them, but they were verbal. So now what we do is, on the front end, we give advice and we use the digital media. And I love the enthusiasm that is in this room about that. And I would commend the hard work, and whether it's late or it's early or whether it's on time or not, it's coming. And eventually I might see the dream that was sold to me when I took the job here to deliver excellent customer service. And maybe, as a resident, we will get to doing it. But I wouldn't rush the important stuff, and the important stuff isn't the shiny stuff at the front, it's the stuff at the back. I'm sorry, it's a bit of a lecture.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
I think we're all in agreement on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so I'm happy to do a pressy response, and then if you would like to add on, because I think you probably know more about the work you've done with the customer services team. So just as an overall, so we can actually see some of the successes of digital already because of the use of the website, etc. So if I look at the pre-COVID call levels into customer services, we're looking at around 45,000 calls per month. It's a sizable sum of calls. Current levels are averaging around 27,000 calls per month. And some of the reasons for that, when we break that down, is because people are now accessing some of those services digitally. So we're seeing a significant reduction of calling because those services are online and because they are getting online responses and are able to get the information. So you mentioned the point about bin collection dates and things like that. Of course, that information now, for most people, they probably won't need to call the council anymore to do that because they will just Google it and up will come the bin collections. For booking a bulky waste collection or going to a tip now, again, online form would do that for them. So the days really of having to use maybe a person direct contact customer services is that there is already going down. That is a trend which is already happening. So I'm not sitting here saying that we'll always have that service, but we have to be candid. It's already happening to some extent. But we also accept that there is a direction of travel to go on many of this as well. Around the complexity of calls has gone up as well. So the days of minor requests, I'm not saying minor, but those things which they can find online have probably gone down. So the complexity of issues we're getting now are more significant, and they do require much more of that interaction around them understanding, well, I reported this 2 months ago, why have I not had a response? Or how long is this going to take to fix? Because I'm expecting a response 3 weeks ago and I haven't had it. So I just want to, and that's the issue here. How do we square that problem? And on that note, I'm going to pass, on that complex note, unfortunately, Paul, how are we going to square that circle? You might have a good answer to this, and I know you do, actually.
So fortunately, the technology is the easy bit. The hard bit is keeping simple end-to-end processes from stats. That's what's taking the time to redesign the process, and it's referenced in Councillor Osborne's report. It is that cultural change that's going to be the hard bit, but we don't underestimate that, and that's a big part. So the technology comes last, we design the service first, and then see where the technology can be applied. Whereas we've seen it go wrong elsewhere, where they do the technology first, and then it doesn't quite do what you want. So we're designing the service first, then applying the technology.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Osborne, and thank you, Paul. Councillor Goldwyn.
Thank you, Chair. Allow me to come back. Councillor Osborne, I'd just like to explore for a moment the governance and the justification for putting digital into the title of this committee, and particularly the governance of business change and digital transformation are quite important. And when we had the transformation board, which you've scrapped, that board met for 2 or 3 hours regularly. The sole items on that agenda was transformation, and it had all the key players there. Bearing in mind this is a scrutiny committee, and task groups are the same, they are not decision-making bodies. Are you really suggesting that we are going to bring items to this committee for pre-scrutiny of decisions on these matters? I just can't see how that would work. I mean, I'm sure all the members in this room would really like to get their teeth into the issues. I mean, we've had some really good insights from members on how the best way to go forward. So, how are we justifying this digital overview and scrutiny committee? Because we're not a decision-making body here, we are purely scrutiny. So are we going to be, I'm not a regular member of this committee, but are the members of this committee going to be invited to pre-decision scrutiny on these matters? Or does that just mean, as we've had tonight, we've had a paper which we can discuss? So what does this really mean? Are we going to use this committee for pre-scrutiny on these issues? Or is it just a reporting and a discussion opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Govan. Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so thank you very much for the question, and it's a very granular question, and very happy to answer it. So we made the decision to bring digital to this committee. I think I said right at the outset the rationale for that was to ensure that we have public accountability on some of the decision making. Some of the conversations tonight, actually extremely important, actually deserve to be heard by the public. The fact that we are going to get a strategy document as highlighted by councillors, and actually that's hopefully a positive outcome of this meeting, where we can look at the programme of work as a strategic body around the delivery of that. Now look, operationally, of course, others will need to, our staff will be delivering this project. I think it's important for members to have a strategic oversight over what is being delivered, at what time it's going to be delivered, hold our operational people account for that delivery, which is what we can do here. And also, if things are being delivered on time, hold their feet to the fire, which a scrutiny body is allowed to do and does so robustly, might I suggest. And more importantly than that, be able to raise issues on a regular basis with me, but also other officers, and also to call in items if needed. And actually, if members here wish to call in items, if they're not happy with that, there is now a process on digital that can happen, of course. Now, I've said earlier that if members would like to go and have a conversation about a members group or some form of operational sort of beta test group, shall we say, or something that people who want to get in the weeds with, what to click on a website, or how to, whether it should be a green button or a yellow button, all of these very important issues, of course, and other important issues. And of course, we can look at that as well. And I know that Paul and others have visited both groups to discuss this platform of change and this programme of change. I'm not averse to looking at the ways of working here. I'm not rigid behind that. But I thought it's really important that it does come to this body, and I think that is the best place for it. From a delivery perspective, I'm happy to be flex around whether we set up other groups with IT to work on a cross-party basis, and others to come in and have a look as well. I mean, I think that would be a fair thing to do. And if we can set up that informally or formally. The Transformation Board, of course, didn't have the same, might I suggest, the same level of scrutiny as this body does in terms of the public oversight as well. That isn't to say that big transformation projects aren't being looked at and we're working in a different way, but in my view, members' involvement here is the critical piece, and actually renaming this committee, much as that is quite superficial, I actually did think is an emphasis shift, because I think most of what business support, as in the operational element of this council, in my view, the digital element of that is going to be critical. Okay, the way people interact with the council now and the way they're going to do so in the future is around this digitalisation agenda. And we have to accept that is a direction of travel. And many members here have accepted that. Many members accept that digital is now an integral part of their lives. And I actually think that is where we're moving. And I think I mean, it's a superficial name change. Maybe it didn't need to happen. Maybe it does. I'm not going to I'll be candid. It's not going to make me lose sleep over something. But in my view, I think digital, it emphasises the importance we place on that transformation. And I think it will be key to actually, whichever administration comes in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I'm hopeful that model will work. But of course, we take ideas and work with all people to improve our accountability on these transformation projects.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne, and thank you for enduring scrutiny questions for the last hour and a half or so. I don't have any other members, so over to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendations 1.1 at page 23. The committee notes the report.
Is that seconded? Yeah. Councillor George, thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Well, that brings us on to agenda item 10, Draft Capital and Revenue Budget 2024-2025. I will ask Katie Durkin, Chief Financial Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The Council's draft budget for 24-25 was presented to the Cabinet last Tuesday, and in accordance with the Constitution, Cabinet's referred it here. So this committee is asked to comment on the budget proposals and then forward them to the other ONS committees before forwarding the collective comments of the ONS committees back to Cabinet ahead of the budget meeting in February. We've updated the report format this year, so hopefully it's a bit of a clearer and easier report to understand. So we've integrated the detail of the actual budget, the numbers, into the report instead of delivering them through appendices, so hopefully it's a bit easier to follow. We've been working to develop the budget for next year since the summer, and we presented the medium-term financial outlook to Cabinet back in September. That set out our initial projections for income and the cost of services, which represented a potential budget gap of almost 39 million. And then we presented the capital strategy to Cabinet in October, and that set out how the Council's requirements and aspirations for capital investment spread out over the next couple of years. The draft budget reflects the introduction of a new approach to actually balancing the Council's budget, whereby each directorate will operate within an agreed budget allocation for 24-25. The allocations set out in the report reflect the assumption that the savings or revised assumptions or additional income will be identified that are equal to the potential budget gap that the report shows, and that currently stands at 35.798 million. The report sets out the areas that the Children and Adults and Regeneration, Culture and Environment Directorates are focusing on to deliver within those allocations, and they're set out at Section 7 and 8 of the report, while Section 9 sets out the work that's already happened in the Business Support Department to address its pressures and to generate income enough to contribute to the wider budget gap. Included in the report, when Cabinet considered the draft budget, they agreed to recommend to Council some changes to the council tax, and that's part of that additional income I just talked about. And they are in the recommendations, but they're that the 100% premium for long-term empty properties would be brought forward so that it applies from 1 year, not after 2 years. The introduction of 100% premium for properties that are unoccupied but furnished, so that's your second homes, from April 2025. And that the discretionary discounts around empty properties that are currently in place will be ended from April 2024. The only other thing to really talk about is that the autumn statement was announced the day after the Cabinet actually met to discuss the draft budget. So while obviously the draft budget, that was after the draft budget was produced, there's actually very little in terms of announcements in the autumn statement that will directly impact the projections in the draft budget anyway. We understand that the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities are going to be publishing a statement on local government funding, and they've said that that will come ahead of the publication of the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement. We're expecting the Provisional Settlement to be announced via a written statement on the 19th of December. That's the day that Parliament rises before Christmas. So we'll take a report to Cabinet in January that articulates the impact of any announcements in the Provisional Settlement for the Council's budget for next year. Meantime, corporate management team and the Cabinet portfolio holders are working to formulate savings proposals to address the remaining gap. And the report also sets out the reviews that have been commissioned from CIPFA and partners in care and health. We're anticipating that those reviews will be concluded or reported back to officers hopefully before Christmas, and that will formulate some action plans that will feed into the budget setting process. Clearly, our primary focus is on revenue, given the scale of that gap, but in terms of capital, the draft budget reflects the current capital programme of about 268 million, and as usual, we'll add capital grant allocations as they're announced. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. Do I have any member? Councillor Harkwell.
Thank you, and thank you, Katie, for the report. It was a very interesting read. My first question, I'm very concerned that in next year's revenue budget, we've put £10 million in for uplift for staff pay. That averages around £5,000 per employee, which is an incredible amount of money, which this council apparently can't afford. It's very worrying that the Medway review that we've had said no in the pilot, no, that this won't be typical of an uplift. Yet in the budget we've put £10 million in for just staff. So I'm sure every employee in Medway Council will be glad to receive their £5,000 next year, but I don't know how we're going to afford it. Secondly, in the budget, we've put something like £314,000 for reintegrating HIF staff into Regen. why. What's the point of, if these people are working on a project that no longer exists, why are they still having to be reintegrated into region? It's a lot of money as well. Another issue in there was we looked at ward wardens. You know, is this just another vanity project for the administration? We have ward wardens at the moment that deal separately in functions such as dogs or litter or something like that, and why have we put such an increase in for ward wardens that is really not required? I may have some other things, but I think that's enough to get going with, and I would like to come back if necessary after the discussions go on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hogwood.
Thanks, Chair.
Kitty, would you like to respond?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. Council's pay bill is about £100 million. So we don't follow the National Joint Council terms for pay for Medway. So Medway Council staff aren't on the same pay scales that most other councils are and that most people will see in terms of publicity about national pay offers. And that means a couple of things. It means that Medway Council staff don't receive incremental pay, so they're on fixed point salaries, and those salaries don't change other than by the cost of living increase. Cost of living increases have been limited to 1 to 2% over a number of years, and last year was a flat sum, which meant for many staff that was less than 2% increase. What that pay uplift or the allowance that we put in for pay doesn't represent is a flat percentage or a flat amount per employee. What it does try to articulate is that, and you can see this in the monitoring reports, Medway Council is really struggling to recruit and retain staff of the right calibre that it needs in some really key roles, and as a result of that, we've got really high levels of temp and agency staff filling substantive posts. Now, most of those staff, or the cost of an agency member of staff because of agency uplift, premium, etc., typically cost maybe half as much as a full-time employee again. So actually, the council's paying through the nose for staff, when actually if we paid our own staff, or if we had more attractive recruitment and retention packages, then I think we could actually make some savings on some of the overspend areas. So we talked a little bit about legal earlier, didn't we? And one of the pressures there is high-cost locums. If we can get our pay structures right and we can recruit and retain permanent staff, then not only will we reduce the cost of overspend, but we will also, we think, see improvements in quality of service because we'd have long-standing employees. The other side of that is that pay is subject to negotiation with the unions, and that process happens at Medway via the Employment Matters Committee. And what we've found in previous years, and we've had some criticism from the unions and frankly some comments from both sides about how we've effectively hamstrung that negotiation process by putting in such a small flat amount into our initial budget allocations. So with all that said, that amount that we've put in was intended to do a number of things. It was intended to start the negotiation process with the union from a point of view of a realistic, meaningful negotiation process. It reflects the administration's appetite to put in place a meaningful pay uplift for its staff in the context of the sort of cost of living pressures and historical decisions that have meant that staff pay in many cases is actually adrift with the market, which is another reason why we struggle to recruit and retain. And also, you'll have seen from the autumn statement, a higher than was predicted uplift for the national living wage, which will impact Medway, which needs to be funded from within that allocation. And then the final thing is in the current year, we've been doing some work on the MedPay review, right? So you've heard a little bit about this, where we're trying to review how our pay and grading structure works and make sure that we've got people at the right points and that there's some form of progression within our pay, again, as part of a plan to improve recruitment and retention of permanent staff. Based on what the impact of those pilot teams that have been done this year, we've put together some estimate of what we think the impact of that rollout could happen on to the rest of the organisation, and that's the other part of what's made that very big number. So I think a large part of that is absolutely subject to that negotiation process, and hopefully by January EMC, the organisation and the unions will have landed on a position that means that we can articulate in the final budget proposal a more, obviously it'll be a more accurate figure, but a figure that represents the result of that negotiation, not a kind of estimate that we hope doesn't hamstring it. Does that make a bit of sense on page? Do you want to come back on that one before I move on?
Just a little bit in the fact that I understand the locums and the premiums we pay, but I'd also like to see that as a line in the budget to say that we're saving. So if MedPay is going to cost us 10 million, then are we going to save 7 by not paying locums, which makes the number a bit more acceptable? But I don't see a number in the budget to reflect that.
I hope so, yeah, actually. So the other side of that coin is obviously that if we are successful in recruiting and retaining more permanent staff, then the cost that we have built into some of our budgets for agency staff, particularly around social care, where agency rates are historically quite high, that we would be able to yield some savings again. But I think that's all part of the process that officers and members are working with at the moment, trying to review the assumptions that the draft budget represents, right? So that 10 million is just a big initial assumption that allows us to reflect that we're going to have to spend some serious money on pay, I think, and that it enables us to, as an organisation, work out how we might make enough savings to contribute towards our staff pay, but not prevent a meaningful process with the union. So that might come down. I don't know. I'm not party to that process, but. Does that help a little bit on the pay? And then I'll move on to your other two. Okay, so in terms of the Housing Infrastructure Fund, we had agreed a significant capital programme, as you know, which would stretch out over a number of years, and we'd agreed some extensions with Homes England, such that the right thing to do for us was to recruit permanent staff into our regeneration team. And the cost of those staff were funded by the HIF grant. The HIF ending hasn't ended Medway's aspiration for regeneration, and there's a significant regeneration programme still in our capital programme. What we found is that we'd recruited some excellent people that the organisation didn't want to lose and wanted to instead move towards our existing regeneration programme, but the way that we'd built those budgets didn't enable us to just simply charge those extra costs to the existing capital schemes, or we would just simply be able to deliver less for capital. But I think in the context of the £170 million programme, the sum that we've been left with to deal with as a revenue pressure is, I think, remarkably low, and I think represents the organisation's intent to keep good staff in those services, I think. And your final question was about a warden for every ward. That's a very difficult question to ask of an officer. In an apolitical officer role, all I can say is that that's a pledge that the administration made to the electorate when it was elected, and so that's what we've reflected in the budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Lawrence.
Chair, I've only got a couple of questions. I'm really nitpicking at some of the numbers. It's the first time I've seen a report like this, so I apologise to members for the nitpicking. I noticed that you're increasing the cost of HR services to schools by 263,000. I'm just wondering if that might end schools buying services from the council, and therefore you're going to have a bigger loss, or you might have to make people redundant. That's my first question. On a similar vein, I notice an increase of £500,000 in respect of court costs. I'm wondering what percentage of our debts and court costs we actually recover at the moment, and if it's a low number, what's the likelihood that actually you're going to collect even less if you just, you know, I don't know what the court costs are, let's say they're 400 quid and now it's going to be £2,000. Actually, we're just not going to collect any of that money, and then you'll be coming back to us and saying, oh, need to find a saving of £300,000 or £400,000. Business rates, I know there's a small, it's a big number, 55 million. I hope I've got that number right, 55 million, up from 53 million. But can you just tell me what the trend is on rates, business rates, over the last few years? And obviously we now retain far more of our business rates than we did before 2013, where this mythical 91% cut comes from. But what's the direction of travel with business rates into the future? And I'm wondering what more we can do to stimulate businesses to move into Medway so we end up collecting more business rates. Thank you. And I say, I apologise for the nitpicking.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Kitty, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have a go, but finance colleagues, if anyone wants to jump in, please do. In terms of schools, what the budget represents is that in the current year, the cost of the services that we provide to schools aren't covered by the charges to schools. And so the budget assumption for next year is that we must charge schools a cost that, a price that meets that cost, right? And schools buy back on academic year bases. Since we've published the fee structure, we've not seen any significant loss of schools. If we did see a significant loss of schools, you're right, we would have to review the viability of delivering that service. But in practice, Medway staff churn at the moment is so significant that we wouldn't need to lose a person, we would just have vacancies that we could move people into, so there would be no risk. I'm confident in saying there'd be absolutely no risk to the staff that are doing that work at the moment. In terms of court costs, I don't actually have the figure to hand as to what proportion of court costs we collect. Do you?
No.
Oh, right, okay. That's all I was going to say.
I was just showing you the
Oh, that's helpful. Actually, yeah, so that's a really good point. So whilst I can't tell you what proportion of specifically the court costs we recover, they're wrapped up in our overall collection rate. So we monitor the collection rate of all the council tax we levy. And if we take someone to court and the court finds that they're liable and allows us to award a court cost, then that becomes part of the debt that we monitor the recovery of. And we collect more than 98% of all the council tax that we raise over a period of time. In terms of court costs specifically, we've done a bit of work to review court costs across Kent, so what our neighbours are charging, and we found that we are comfortably the lowest, and the amount that we've pitched our increased cost at, we believe would still put us, if not at the lowest or among the lowest, once the rest of Kent are reviewing. Because obviously all local authorities are struggling financially at the moment, and so everyone is looking at the same things. It's important to point out that that is a cost that is agreed with the court as being a reasonable representation of the cost that it actually costs the council. So there's no profiteering element. That's again about covering off the cost of the service. The other thing to say is, without getting too technical about it, the really complicated thing about the collection fund is that you budget for what you forecast you'll get in every year, and if you don't collect as much as you've said you've collected, then it becomes a pressure for the following year, so you're allowed a bit of time to actually manage that and adjust your assumptions moving forward. In terms of business rates, that's a really big question. So, I'll have a stab. So, in 2013, you're right, the government changed the business rates regime, and effectively what it did is it went from the government bearing all the risk of growth or reduction in business rates and instead to a position where local authorities shared that risk on a roughly 50-50 basis. In terms of the local rates base, we've got a reasonably healthy tax base, and it is continuing to grow, albeit we're not in sort of anywhere near the top echelons of local authorities whose business rates growth far outstrips ours, but there are lots of local authorities with no growth or actually reducing business rates take, so we're not in that place. Our business rates base is growing slightly. There's a lot of concern in the sector about the extent to which the government has propped up businesses paying business rates for the last few years, because since the pandemic, the government has funded a 75% discount for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, and obviously that's a significant part of the local economy. We've had that confirmed, will continue for next year, and that is again fully funded by the government. So I think there's nervousness about what might happen to the business rates base if that funding and support were to end, but that would be from 25-26 onwards. I think in terms of activity to grow the business rates base by attracting businesses to the area, I'd probably have to direct you to the council's capital programme and the work underway in terms of regeneration. So there's some significant parts of our capital programme that are trying to attract business to Medway, and obviously we hope that at some point the government has indicated it will consider again extending the business rates retention scheme. So for one brief year we were in a 100% retention pilot, did very well out of it, and so well in fact I think the government concluded it was probably not affordable on a grand scale, and so has talked about possibly doing a 75% retention, but I think we wait for the next Parliament, whatever that looks like, to make any sort of further changes on the wider scheme. Hopefully that helps.
Just one very quick follow-up. I suppose the council-owned business property that's empty, do we still incur the business rate on that?
Yeah, because the discretionary discounts for empty properties we're not allowed to grant to ourselves.
No, okay. So therefore the property programme, I think that Councillor Hackwell referred to as one way of reducing our expenses would be to dispose of that empty property if we can, or let it really cheaply, so at least we don't have to cover the business rates, and actually might stimulate a little bit of economic activity.
I think sort of specialists in services like Regen might be more well versed on the pros and cons of that kind of activity, but in theory, yes, we would save on the rates that we have to pay ourselves.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Hackwell, you want to come back?
Yeah, just quickly, I think I don't want to hog the limelight, but I was interested to read in the report the potential £800,000 saving from single person discount. I'd be interested in how that number was created. Is it just a simple mass of we're at 31.6 and our peers are at 30, so 1.6% of our, there's this potential? Or, I mean, from all the audit committees and things that I've been attending over the years with James Larkin and the counter fraud, he states that, we now match databases to the government databases to check that these people are not claiming and their driving licences are not registered at addresses and all those. So if it was just done by a percentage, have these figures gone through James and his team to concur that that's a likely potential? Because for the years that I've been attending, I don't get that impression from James. He doesn't feel that there's that amount of flexibility in the system. So that's one point. The second point that got mentioned is the rate holiday that's afforded to second homes. A lot of second homes are not actually second homes; they're owned by private landlords renting them out. And when there's a churn in tenants, there's some time where that property gets refurbished, cannot be lent out, the property's not generating any income or, in fact, any use of council services. So if that discount is removed, all that will do is force the landlord to make rents higher. We're already because they will want to recoup that extra expense that they're having to incur and pass that on to the tenants that they finally put into the property. We're already a place in the world where private sector rents are the highest they've ever been. A lot of people are struggling to find properties, and have been for many years. As soon as a property goes up for rent, there's 20 or 30 people fighting to actually get into that property because they're so rare. So putting extra pressure on those people, is that a sensible thing to do for the people in Medway, to actually pass that cost on? Because it's not a profit for the landlord. That extra cost will be going directly via the landlord, I admit, and probably recouped many times over, depending how long the tenant stays in the property. So I'd like some thoughts on whether that is actually a sensible idea for the people of Medway.
Thank you, Councillor Hackwell. Katie, would you like to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. So the SPD review, we're not looking to identify fraud here. I think what we found is that our peers who have lower SPD rates typically have a resource that's just keeping on top of that workload, right? So actually writing out to people who've got a single person discount, asking them to confirm that they're still eligible, and doing this kind of work on a routine basis. Our team's quite lean and we don't have the capacity to do that in the current financial year. So we've commissioned, with some salary savings from a vacant post, our software provider to do the review for us. And it's already just demonstrating, we've literally only just written out to people and people are starting to write back, but it's already demonstrating lots of people who just haven't got the paperwork done in time. We all sort of, you know, moving's quite a tricky time, isn't it? Not everyone necessarily prioritises notifying the council that they've moved, or that, you know, somebody's moved in with them, or whatever the situational change is. And so we're not looking to find a load of people that we prosecute for fraud here. I think we're talking about a quicker admin, and that means that people should be telling us that they're liable slightly earlier, or they were liable slightly earlier. And so it's really just a piece of administrative work. And there's a couple of bits like that in this report, right? So the other one about completion notices, and just if we can do that work quicker, the routine maintenance of our property database and our people database, that's what drives up those numbers. And just in kind of context, on about 150 million pounds worth of council tax, 500,000 just shows you how small a number we're actually talking about here. So yes, certainly not a kind of, it is something we talked about with James, but we're not looking for fraud here. This is just about tidying up our administration of our database and acting on information a bit more quickly. In terms of second homes, I think the issue for us is that we've got a lot of policies across the council. There's a lot of work trying to reduce the number of empty properties, right, to try and bring back properties into use. And in that context, having two discounts that are quite a perverse disincentive to people bringing properties back into use far faster doesn't help with that agenda. And obviously, they are non-statutory discounts. They're discounts that the council gives of its own discretion, and in the current financial climate, I think there are other areas that budget could be more beneficial. So I'm not sure I'm well placed to comment on sensibleness of policy in respect of second homes, but I think for me the numbers, we need to find ways to generate more income to help support the rising spiralling costs of statutory services across children and adults and homelessness, and this is one of the opportunities to the council to do that, I think.
Okay.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Godwin.
First of all, Chairman, I must have felt a bit uncomfortable with the last discussion, because I must declare an interest. I am a private landlord, but I will not take part in any of that. So, and I will make no comment on that at all, because I do let a property out. So could I please register that as a declaration, and that I will take no part in that part of the discussion at all. We've had tonight quite a considerable discussion on business change and transformation, and I see in the budget for 24-25 under budget pressures is 427k, which will pay for Paul's excellent efforts. But I can't spot anywhere in there where there's a consummate savings. I was a little bit disappointed that Councillor Osborne had not a clue of what the transformation savings are likely to be in the current financial year. But could officers assure me that from that investment, and which I think quite fully support, because that small investment over the years has made a huge contribution to reducing the council's costs. So can officers give an estimate of what return we will get on that 427k? I know it's very, very difficult to make predictions so far in advance, but we must have some idea of what return we're going to get on that investment.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you. We're in the budget process at the moment, and Paul has been going round to the directorate management teams and planning a route map or a road map for the transformational effort and rolling out Medway 2.0 and what have you. And it's from that plan we're hoping that we'll come up with a plan for savings that will then inform the budget that we're going to present in February. So that work is going on. So first of all, we wanted to make sure that we had the resource there to deliver it, and that's why we've in the MTFO, we base funded it, and in the draft budget we base funded it. But in terms of closing the gap, absolutely that, the transformation. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Paul. But.
May I?
Katie wants to come in. Katie
Sorry,
first, then Paul.
Just for in the current year, that team alone has helped my team and another part of Paul's team to deliver the transformation savings target that we had for the transformation of how people can access revenues and benefit services, and overshot its delivery. So this report tells you that it's delivered 568,000 against a target of 400, and we simply wouldn't have done that work had we not had the business change resource. So just a personal plea to keeping it.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah.
So there's no longer separate transformation targets like there used to be. So we're now actually working with the services to achieve that saving there, this saving here, to balance these budgets. So it is shown slightly differently, but we can certainly pull out the projects and show you where we've had the impact going forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, I get that, but I think as an authority that we're investing, at some stage we need to have that cumulative total. I well know all the good work that goes on, and I'm pleased that Katie's given one excellent example of how those benefits can accrue. But I still think at some stage we need a summation, but not also being careful not to count the savings twice, as we did accidentally once or twice in the past, if I remember rightly.
Thank you, Councillor. Katie, would you like to comment?
Sorry, just one last comment. When we had this conversation at corporate management team, if you want to put a number on it, it's the budget gap, isn't it? I don't think this organisation will be able to deliver the scale of savings that it needs to unless we have a resource that can help people to manage those programmes of transformation. And so if you want a number, it's about 35 million.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Lawrence,
sorry,
a question.
Just one final question. Is there anywhere in the budget that reflects the impact of the roof coming in at Gun Wharf? I'm sure that's not a narrative on the new administration, but it does. I was surprised that there's no line, because I would have thought office accommodation, the repairs of the roof. I know it's very early days, but some form of amount.
Phil, would you like to come in?
You've made the point, it is early days, so when the draft budget was taken, and well, the MTFO initially, and then the draft budget was taken to Cabinet, there will need to be, I think CMT and the administration are still working through what the options are. And it kind of boils down to should we stay, should we go, if I'm being brutally honest. And that conversation's taking place. Those options are being costed out, and then whatever we land on as the preferred recommendation will need to be reflected in the budget for next year.
Yeah, okay. I mean, my plea would be if the ICB dragged their feet any more on the Healthy Living Centre in the Pentagon, then maybe we should take that space, because actually, can you imagine the regen impact of lots of council staff working in the Pentagon in terms of footfall and spend? Or Debenhams, maybe? Yeah. Anyway.
Thank you. Katie, would you like to comment?
Just, I suppose the only point I would make on where in the budget any of it is reflected is we have a building repairs and maintenance fund. It is not going to fund the work that will be required. But in the capital strategy, which went to Cabinet in October, we talked about the results of the initial surveys of investment requirements for the whole council property portfolio. And over 5 years, it was about 24 million. So we've already got some idea about what level of investment is going to be required on our property estate. I think what this has done is probably precipitated a discussion about rationalising some of that before we before we commit to signing on the dotted line on a contract to do the works.
Thank you. I don't have any other members. Before I come to you, Vice Chair, Katie, just need a little bit of clarification on the assumptions with regards to adult savings or additional funding for children and adult services. I think you got 22.67 million. How are we going to achieve savings or the additional funding required?
So that is a very challenging target, isn't it? Which is why we've taken the decision to get some external support in. So we've commissioned a review by CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accountancy. They've got access to a huge amount of benchmarking data, which they'll analyse our budgets and our spend and compare it to that and point us to where they think maybe we're spending too much, maybe we're not spending enough. You know, just focus us on the areas where we need to perhaps look in terms of balancing our budget. So yeah, that's the action that we're taking. I think Katie wanted it.
Thank you. Before Councillor Garvin, Katie, would you like to comment?
Thank you. I mean, absolutely everything Phil said is 100% correct. I think I'm sure next week we've got CYP and HASC, haven't we? Yeah. And so I'm sure this will be the subject of much conversation at those committees. But just to say that the leadership teams of those, that directorate has certainly not just sort of said that's too big a number to work with, right? We've started out at this point in previous budget cycles with very big numbers. I think this year everyone is clear that the challenge is slightly different, and that I think we're not expecting that the autumn, the local government finance settlement is actually likely to give us the kind of boost that it did this time last year. But the services are working really hard to revise the assumptions that are in these reports, right? At this point, they're a set of assumptions that assume that if we carry on working in the way that we work at the moment, we will need to spend X million more on all of those services. Actually, some of those assumptions we typically review. You know, what do we need to provide, and what will uplifts look like to the market? And so there's a lot of work happening in the service to look at those assumptions in the first place, but also lots of work to come up with sort of proposals and business cases for initiatives that might be able to deliver services in slightly different ways, and how that might represent some savings on the costs that are in this report. And so I think that's probably the process over the next couple of months, will be taking the advice of the external reviewers and maybe using that to sort of help to check the proposals that are coming through from the service. But I think those conversations at people at places like CYP and HASC and perhaps business support, when we get the comments from the other ONS committees back in January, that might be hopefully we would be a lot further down the road to closing that gap. But I did laugh initially because it is a really big number, right? This is a really difficult budget to balance. So, but hopefully that's a bit more insight into what the services are doing.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Galvin.
Well, I'd just like to say, having had a grilling yesterday afternoon for quite some time from some of the CIPFA team, I think Phil Watts' initiative of getting CIPFA in for that review was a really good idea. I've got to say, I was really impressed by the questions, the detail and the technicality of the questions I was asked. So if that's the quality of the people we've got doing that review, I think that was a really good step forward. And, you know, I look forward to seeing the results of that, yes. But no, I don't often give you praise, Phil, but that was well done on that, yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any other members, so over to you, Vice Chair.
I'll move the recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 and 1.3 and 1.4 at page 73.
Is that seconded? Councillor Brown, is that agreed? Agree. Okay. That brings us to agenda item 11, the work program. I will ask Steve Dickens, Democratic Services Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just take you through the changes to the work programme, then I'll hand over to Wayne regarding the scrutiny task groups. Two changes to the work programme. The procurement strategy was due to come to this meeting. It needs further work, so it will come to the next meeting. of the committee, and the council planning and strategy will be considered in April. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Steve. Yeah, so in terms of scrutiny task groups, obviously at the last meeting of this committee, you agreed a priority order for task groups and also the composition and size of those task groups except the air quality and public transport and active travel. We obviously contacted the groups after that meeting, and before you tonight is a proposal from the majority group at paragraph 6.5 in the report, which would be a membership of 7, and that is 4 Labour and Cooperative, 2 Conservative group, 1 independent group, and also with a name substitute for each of the Labour and Cooperative and Conservative groups. And I'll hand back to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any member? Is that seconded? Councillor Goldman, thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.